we could make our way, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning.
Huh? Yeah, I know. It's all right.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the June 5th, 2019 meeting of the Indiana State Board of Education. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
Here.
Dr. Freitas?
Present.
Mr. Gastineau?
Present.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Superintendent Foreman?
Here.
Dr. McMahon?
Present.
Ms. Smoke?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Present.
Ms. Wicker?
Here.
Dr. Yeager? Mr. Watts?
Here. If you would, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I do have a couple changes to the agenda if we could. We are going to move the SQR report, which is discussion item A, to the first item of action. And we are going to remove TAC updates until next month, which is E. And we are going to add Condesi to the Turnaround Academy report, which would be number B3. Get all that right, Brian? Did I get all that right? The amendments? Okay, could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the April 10th, 2019 and May 1st, 2019 meetings?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Statement of the chair. I would like to, we all got some news yesterday that Gordon has decided to move on to other things, and I have to tell you that it's been an absolute pleasure. I know we talked yesterday, but I wanted to make that public. It's been a pleasure to work with you. And one of the things that when I talk with folks, I talk about how the greatest thing about this job is the people that you get to work with and their passion for doing what's right by kids. And you've done that in every single vote. And even sometimes when we may disagree about the best way to get there, what was best for kids was always at the forefront of what you did, and that's why I appreciate it. And as you said yesterday, I hope we can still break bread together when we're up here. So, job well done. My dad always said, "Leave it better than you found it," and you can take pride in the fact that you did that.
Well, if I can just take the opportunity to thank my fellow board members for their service, their commitment to children in Indiana, and also thank the staff for their hard work over the years during my service. And I think they're often unappreciated. They get caught in the middle of a lot of stuff, and I can just speak for myself and say that I could not have done nearly anything without the hard work of the staff behind the scenes. So thank you to the State Board of Education staff and all those at the department that I've worked with over the last 6 years or so. And, this is not an easy board to sit on. We've obviously deal with a lot of very significant and important issues, a lot of divisive issues. And I think that despite all that, the professionalism and the commitment to the mission of what we're trying to accomplish here at our board meetings, that my fellow board members have conducted themselves over the years in the finest way. We work together, despite what you might read in the newspaper. This board is committed to working together to solve important issues. So just like to thank everybody, and it's been an honor to be on the board, and I'm looking forward to doing some other things. Thank you.
Good for you. Any other board member comments? Mary?
Yes, please, thank you. First of all, Gordon and I talked before the meeting, but congratulations on your decision, and thank you for your service. You've been a valuable member of this board, and I really enjoyed working with you. Learned a lot from you, so thank you. I just want to explain that last month I was not in attendance at the meeting because I was in Washington, D.C. attending an early child education conference through NASB. It was a work group that was generated to really look at policy in early childhood education. There were 11 states represented, and I certainly felt honored to be in attendance for the state of Indiana. While we were there, we had the opportunity to do a site visit in Arlington and went to a Montessori public school and got to observe their preschool programming. It was not to say that Montessori is the program for preschool, but it certainly is a program that provides the foundational understanding and social, emotional, and academic foundations for preschool students. And so it was a great opportunity for us to get together and to start to look at what's happening for 0 to 5-year-olds across our states. And a few of the key pieces of information that were great reminders to me as a public educator is that a lot happens in 0 to 5. And students or children at that age certainly need positive exposures in social, emotional settings, and they need opportunities to some foundational learnings during these critical years when they are highly capable. And the reality is many of our students do not have access to those types of programs and therefore come to our public schools or any schools with huge gaps in all of those 3 major areas. And so we had lots of conversation about what can be done and how we can help influence policy in our states to improve that situation. And so it was definitely worth my time, and I again apologize for not being here. However, we will have 2 further meetings that will take place, not in person. We won't be going back to DC, but later this summer we're going to have conference calls, and then in the fall. And I certainly look forward to continuing this conversation and bringing more information back to the board. But thank you. I just wanted to share where I was last month.
Thank you. Good. Any other comments?
BJ, and Gordon, to you, it's interesting. Of course, I didn't know about your decision until yesterday, but I wrote about you this week for NASB because, if you're going to form great communities, the greatest thing you can do is have the invite or the ask, right? And you did that my first weeks on the board. You personally reached out, I think, to all new members and said, hey, you ought to go to NASB's new member, you ought to be involved in that. And I appreciate that because I think we have a lot of the involvement we have now because of that. And I'm now, of course, I've been on the board and all of those things, right? So I appreciate that about you and just wanted to say that because I think that's important that you've always been reached out and said, hey, this was good, you should go. I think those are important things to do, and I appreciate that. So wanted you to know that. The other thing I wanted to do was just say a kudos to the board. Yesterday I had the opportunity to meet with John Schnur, who is the president and CEO of America Achieves, and then also met with their senior policy person, Jade Greaves. And it was interesting, in the middle of this meeting, Jade said, and I asked for permission to say this, she said, Indiana was not on our radar at all in education till grad pathways started hitting with everything that it's hit with, and that really made me feel good. I feel like we've done some great work. I commend Dr. McCormick, Dr. Freitas, and you, BJ, for being on that panel. I think, again, we did some great things there, and people recognize that nationally. But I think this board should be very proud of what we did there to have an organization like America Achieves say, hey, you weren't on our radar till this happened. I think it was great. So I wanted to share that with everyone.
Thanks, sir. Anything else? Okay, we have no public comment. We actually have 2 public comments, but they are item specific, so there's no general public comments. Consent agenda. We have Assignment of school numbers, a resolution regarding staff approval of school numbers, freeway accreditation extensions, freeway accreditation for World Changers and Bloomington Islamic School, Israel School of Excellence freeway contract amendment, approval of education dispute resolution working group membership, special education child count, proposed rule for alternate diploma, update to DWD's CTE categorizations and funding, latchkey waiver, and locally created pathways MSD of Decatur Township. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So
And
moved.
Jay, before that motion, I want to note that I'm going to recuse myself from item I of the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Actually, we'll move to discussion item A now. I know Robin has to get moving, so we will do the school quality review report first before we get into action items. Good morning.
Good morning. I thought I was going to have all morning to get ready, but I guess we're going now. Is the PowerPoint on? I just need to click it. Okay. Good morning. I have submitted a memo to you about the moving forward with school quality reviews for next year, but I did want to come and talk to you about the process this year. I texted the team to hustle over because they were going to come a little bit later when we thought we were later on the agenda. So hopefully by the time we're done, I'll be able to recognize the team that did such a great job with school quality reviews this year. As you know, the school quality review process is Indiana Code 2031-9-3 that has the state board assign an expert team to make recommendations and assist a school in revising their school improvement plan and recommend changes to a school that is in failing status to promote that improvement. So this is an opportunity for the Department of Education and the board to provide targeted, actionable feedback to district and school leaders and identify ways for the Department of Education to provide additional follow-up support, which is what we want to spend most of our time doing, providing support to schools and helping schools, school leaders, teachers, families, and students be more successful. From November through March, the Indiana Department of Education conducted 10 school quality reviews in 6 districts in Indiana. Each school quality review consisted of a virtual or in-person pre-visit conference, and then a 2-day on-site review that's a comprehensive visit. There are about 14 or 15 work hours each day of those 2 days spent with school staff, parents, community members, student focus groups, and conducted by the technical assistance team that is made up of Indiana teachers, principals, district leaders, expert consultants, community members, and Department of Education team members. The focus of the guiding questions and the visit are centered around the University of Chicago's 5 essentials for school improvement, which we went over last year when we were organizing the visits for this year. Each school quality review resulted in a report with actionable recommendations and feedback influenced by the University of Chicago 5 essentials model. Those reports have been submitted to you for your review, and once they're approved by this board, will be uploaded onto the website. During the process of the 18-19 school quality reviews, we had 16 Indiana Department of Education staff, 8 principals, 4 district leaders, 3 instructional coaches, 11 teachers from the field, 2 expert consultants, 9 community members that sat on these technical assistance teams. There were 379 students in focus groups. We spoke to 379 students in focus groups to get their feedback on the quality of their school, the rigor of their content, their engagement in the process. We have 205 teacher focus groups. When we went into schools and met with teacher focus groups, we were able to speak to those teachers and get their feedback. We had 214 additional teachers completing surveys, 90 community members in focus groups, 453 family members that completed surveys, and 342 classroom observations during those 10 school quality reviews. That gives you an idea of how comprehensive they are, looking at every aspect from a school and trying to provide that actionable feedback. The important part to me, those were all the numbers and statistics, but the important part to me is this slide, the key themes from our SQR visits, what the lessons that we've learned and how we can move forward in the next year helping and supporting these schools and other schools in Indiana. There's a need for varied, high-yield instructional strategies to be used in most classrooms. Instruction should be standards-focused with student-friendly learning targets. And we need to have job-embedded professional development with follow-up coaching being provided by school leaders as needed. Those key themes will frame the work of the school improvement specialists over the next year. The PD that we provide, the support that we give to schools, will be focused on these things. We have recently released a professional development menu that schools can go to and request our team to come out on some of the things related to these themes. We've been working on a cohesive and consistent plan throughout the state of professional learning communities, as that is, research has shown that that is one of the best ways to improve a school. All of our efforts are framed around the 5 essentials out of the University of Chicago. The research that shows the greatest improvement happens when those 5 essentials are in place at a school. So our follow-up support will be to partner and debrief those SQR reports with staff. We've gone back to the schools, met with the staff, and gone over the report with the staff. We debriefed the report with the central office and school leadership as well. We have begun the process, really in the middle of the process, of helping these schools develop comprehensive needs assessments and their school improvement plans. We're offering differentiated follow-up support through professional development as needed and building collaborative, ongoing partnerships with our schools. It has been our goal over the last year and a half to make sure schools know the Department of Education is here to help them. We're here to partner with them. We're here to support them. We want schools to be more successful, families to be more successful, students to be more successful. That is our goal. We're not here to monitor. We're here to help, to support, to do whatever we can. The specialists that we have in place on the school improvement team are specialists who are committed to that theme, to that idea. As we look ahead to 1920, we will continue to follow the Chicago 5 Essentials for the school improvement model. Remember, that was a change for this year. We went from the turnaround principles from No Child Left Behind to the University of Chicago 5 Essentials. We will continue to use that model. We will add a follow-up teacher survey for feedback from teachers on how they felt about the process so that we can continue to improve our process, continuous improvement and learning. We will locate all of our information about the SQR process in Simplicity so that team members will be able to work on it together. And our focus on Gold Star customer service, which is the message from our leader, will continue. With that, I will open it up for questions, and I know some of my team came, so if they can join me. Anybody who ran from, come on up. Don't leave me up here by myself. I see you right there.
Are there any questions by board members? I do want to thank you and your team for sure. I mean, I know how intense the work that goes into these reviews are, so job well done, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
David?
Robin, thanks for your good work and your team's good work. I talked to several teachers in my area who participated in this. They felt it was very worthwhile, so thank you for that. I want to drill down a little to look at the success of the program. And you're dealing with some of the most struggling schools in our state.
Indeed.
D&F schools primarily, or?
F schools that are in their second year of F, based on the state accountability system, are the schools that receive a school quality review. I would like to add, and I know you're getting ready to ask something, so hold on one second for me so I don't forget, that we had schools that did not have to statutorily receive a school quality review because of our reputation, who actually called us, and we went and did school quality reviews in 4 schools across the state because they requested one and not because they were statutorily required to have one. And I think that speaks to the support piece. It also speaks to the support piece from the department because you all pay, the state board pays for school quality reviews that are statutorily required, and the department picks up the cost for those that are requested.
I join you in commending those schools who voluntarily do that. We believe in continuous improvement, so this is a way to have outside people come in and provide input. My question deals with accountability and how do we judge the success of this program? Is it working or isn't it working? And there's a number of great inputs, but I guess I'm looking for outputs in some way. So my question is, you've been doing this for a number of years, I assume. How many years have you?
I've been at the department for a year and a half.
How many schools have we done over that time?
49.
40. Wow.
Last year, we had 39 schools in position to be having a school quality review. This year, only 10. Of those 39 last year, we had several, and I don't have the number on top of my head, but Kelly might. How many came off of that list?
I'm going to say around 10.
We had about 10 come off of the list of being an F school based on state accountability. So when you look at accountability, part of it's going to be on grades. We can look at that, but obviously that's an annual look. We're following up with these schools on a regular basis, going back in and following up with how they're following the recommendations that were given, and also inviting them to be part of a continuous improvement cycle, a PLC cohort. Melissa Blossom started a strategy. Instead of saying, hey, contact us if you'd like us to come, she says to them, when is it you'd like us to come, and has her calendar out. And so there's accountability in that way as well.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to look at accountability. For me, one of the ways, and one of the only standardized ways we have in the state of Indiana, unfortunately, is through state tests. And we can use those in a variety of different ways. But the first thing is just get the data.
Correct.
And what we do with the data is, who knows what we're going to do with the data. But what I'd like to see is, after you provide an intervention to those schools, what is their school grade the next time the grades are announced? So I would like to see a chart. Here's all the schools. This is the date where we provided the intervention. This is their initial grade, which I think you said it's going to be an F. And did their grade go up in 1 year, or 2 years later, or 3 years later? That would help me understand in a more standardized kind of way, because every superintendent thinks they have the best schools in the country.
Certainly.
And that's great. I commend that, that aspirational statement. But I'd like to see some hard data. Is that possible to provide that to us?
I'm sure it is. I would like to speak from having been a building principal for 8 years and assistant principal for 2 years prior to that.
Sure.
We go into schools between the months of November and January, basically, and depending on snow days, it can bleed into February. So to say your very next grade, because if we leave a school in February, they take a standardized test in April. It would not be realistic or fair to ask a school to make substantive change between February and April when their students take the standardized test. That's why in year 3 of your accountability process, there isn't another visit or another something that happens. We give them that year 3 to act on the feedback, and then we start looking at those grades. So I would say, I think saying after 1 year would really be talking about looking at it after 2 months. So we need to maybe think to the following year on how many students come, or how many schools come off.
Yeah,
of
I'm
that
at the
list.
stage of just collecting the data. As I said, how we use the data. When you present year by year by year, you're probably going to be back up there and you can make that statement
Absolutely.
again. And I will agree with you. But I would like to see some kind of trend so we can assess the success of this program. My intuition tells me it's very successful, so I want to celebrate
Sure.
that success. But without any data, we're just going on and
Yep.
on and on. So let's create the data. Let's do it year by year by year, and then we can have a discussion.
And we do
about
keep
that.
track of that, so it'd be easy to put a slide in for that.
Okay. Do you want to come back next meeting and present that, or would you like to get it to us before the next meeting?
Let me discuss that with my leadership, and I'll get back with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for that.
Any other questions?
Just wanted to follow up on that. That's why I think standardized testing, we ought to look at more, right? Anyway, I have to throw that in there. 453 families did your survey.
Yes.
Do you know, and I'm not expecting you to know this, but my colleague across the aisle here from, I shouldn't say across the aisle, but across the room here from me, and I are Carrie and I, because we're not on separate aisle. But
We agree.
we like the survey thing. I've become a fan of qualitative data, and I think it has a lot of use. What was your total N number if everybody, and I'm not saying I'm expecting that, I was just curious, what would the do you know what the total N number would have been on that? Like what your percent?
So we don't have that data.
Okay.
And let me add that we've also done the Panorama Family Survey for 71 of our CSI schools that opted into our survey.
Okay.
Every one of the CSI schools is required to do the culture climate survey
Okay.
with families. The department offered Panorama as a vendor. It was provided to them at no cost. Terrell's been leading that charge with Panorama, and we just met with them yesterday to look at data. 71 CSI schools opted into that's apart from these 10 that had an SQR.
Okay. I know I can speak for Carrie. You've excited us now to say that, right, Carrie? So are you seeing, and I'm not looking for, Dr. Freitas would argue with me that I need to be valid and reliable. I don't really care at this point. What I want to know is, have you seen any correlation between what you've seen on those surveys and the improvement of the school? I'm sure you've looked at that, and I'm not looking for you to say it's statistically significant. Are you seeing that because what we've found in studying these surveys is that tells us a lot about the trajectory of the school, because having been a guy that's willingly taken on some of these schools, right, I've always said there's no reason for them to have ever been there. I've always contended that and will always contend to that. And that's where I've become a fan of the survey thing, because research tells us that, and I'm more of a fan of Dr. Ferguson out at Harvard, because I've had the chance to work with Tripod and that. But we see that matters. Have you seen that at all? Can you speak to that at all? And if not, I'd like to see with David, is there something that we see with that? Because I still am of the belief that we should include something like that in accountability, right? But so I'm just
it'd
curious.
be better to look at that from the Panorama surveys. These 10 schools that take the surveys we give out are already in failing status. They've had an F for 2 years. Families and communities are aware of that. And so, yes, the survey data would indicate that in some ways. And then in other ways, as Dr. Freitas said, every superintendent might say they have the best school. Many families and community
Sure.
members that we meet with in schools that are failing support their schools, love the people, feel that they're in a good school.
And I would argue that matters.
It does matter. It does matter. And so that's what we're seeing. I would say the Panorama data that we're going to have from the 71 CSI schools will give us the kind of information you're asking, which is, does that data sort of indicate what we could predict?
Okay.
Is it predictor?
I applaud. I think it's cool that you're doing this. I think that's an important climate culture thing is huge for this, right? So thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but to Robin and her team, I just want to once again thank you publicly for everything you do for the schools and for the department. By far, when I'm out on the road across the state, this team comes up. The professional development you are providing, just the day-to-day support you are providing, trying to bridge things with the teacher leadership, administrative leadership, with the work that you're doing so we're not siloing, it's mattering, and it truly does make a difference to our schools. So to our team, you are rocking it, continue to do what you're doing, and I cannot tell you thank you enough, so great job.
And for our team, I know we speak as one on this. It is attitude reflects leadership, and your leadership about Gold Star customer service and supporting schools and be there side by side with schools has made an impact on our work.
Thank you. You can just stay there all day.
All right.
What a kumbaya moment.
I know. Let's hold hands.
We got a good team.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very
I
much.
appreciate your time. I would like for each member just to say their name into the microphone, if you don't mind.
Love
Thank
that.
you.
You're getting the evil eye, Robin. Getting the stink eye.
Hi, I'm Kelly Great. I've been here, I'll be 2 years in August. So.
Awesome.
I'm Terrell Berry. I'll be 2 years in November.
Melissa Blossom. I'm the assistant director, and I'll be celebrating 2 years June 10th.
Diane Veely, and I've been here since January.
John Purcell, 2 years in October.
Well, welcome, and thank you very much for what you've done. Okay, new business. Action item A, Independence Academy.
We have two public comments. They're actually kind of wrapped with the presentation, but we have John Elsesser and Marissa Gill. John Elsesser requested you first.
Okay. John, you're up, buddy. Welcome, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. McCormick, members of the committee, we're back. Kind of feels like Groundhog Day. I'm John Elsesser. I'm Executive Director of the Indiana Non-Public Education Association, and I'm here to speak in support of Independence Academy's A to F appeal. I'm here with Marissa Gill, who's the head administrator at Independence. As you know, we presented our appeal at the April board meeting, and because the vote lacked a constitutional majority, we're back. Now, even though some of you were not in attendance at the April board meeting, we plan to kind of streamline the presentation rather than repeating everything that we said at the April meeting, although there will be a few additional pieces that we will add to the presentation as well. I'll provide some context and background, and Marissa will provide the details. And we only ask that you keep an open mind. Our request today is simple. In light of the General Assembly passing legislation back in 2013, as stipulated in IC 2031-8-4.5, which required this board to develop alternative benchmarks, performance indicators, and accountability standards to be used in the assessment of schools that focus exclusively on providing an academic program for students with developmental, intellectual, or behavioral challenges. And since it wasn't until the April board meeting of this year that the rulemaking process was initiated, we are simply asking that Independence Academy and any other school meeting the criteria of IC 2031-8-4.5 receive a null grade only until the alternative system has been developed. I'm currently not aware of anything outside the board approval that has happened with the rulemaking process to date, but Tim probably can speak more to that. With that in mind, we don't believe that the school should be penalized for the board's lack of action. Now, Dr. Yeager asked at the April meeting about precedent. We believe there is precedent for this request. In reviewing the hearing officer's reports for both Daymar and Hope Academies, we contend that there are great similarities in their findings. First and foremost, all three schools serve exclusively students from special populations. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read a few excerpts from Daymar's findings. And as I read them, I'd ask that you keep Independence Academy in the back of your mind as I say Daymar Academy, because you'll see the similarities. And just as a point of information, both Daymar and Hope Academies had the same hearing officer, Kevin McDowell, who previously served as general counsel for the Department of Education under then Superintendent Dr. Reed. Mr. McDowell had a tendency to be a little bit more explicit in his findings in comparison to Independence Hearings Officer Mr. Hanna, but you'll still see similarities. So if you bear with me, just a few excerpts. Daymar Academy provides intensive, individualized educational programs and behavioral support to students with autism and other intellectual and developmental challenges. In 2014-15 school year, Daymar Academy was placed in the accountability category of no grade due to the unique population it serves. Again, in 2015-16 school year, Daymar Academy was placed in the accountability category of no grade due to the unique population it serves. Daymar Academy should be assessed under IC 2031-8-4.5. The Daymar Academy focuses exclusively on providing an academic program for students with developmental, intellectual, and behavioral challenges. And he goes on in his decision to say, the board's accountability category calculation for Daymar Academy is incorrect, but only because the wrong standards have been applied both in the past and presently. Although the board properly followed 511 IAC 62-10 in its calculation, the category determination does not reflect the performance of the many factors Daymar Academy encounters. The unique student population of Daymar Academy cannot be judged on the basis of standardized test and graduation rates alone. For this reason, the General Assembly enacted IC 2031-8-4.5, but no steps have been taken since July 1st, 2013, effective date, to apply that statute to effective schools such as Daymar Academy. Damar Academy has received a no grade or null determination in the past, and given current circumstances, received the same designation for 2016-17 school year as well. Accordingly, the board's calculation of a category placement of F was improper under these circumstances and should be changed to a no grade or null category. And that was dated October 12, 2017. I'd like to add one final item to that. In the past legislative session, House Enrolled Act 1629 included language that gave broader flexibility to this board in an appeal to assign a null grade. The language in the bill reads, after considering the petition for review, the state board may direct the department to revise the category or designation assigned to the school corporation or school, including assigning a null or no letter grade. The state board may grant that null designation for multiple years. As I understand, an emergency act was declared for 1629, so it went into effect upon the governor's signature. As Marissa and I stated back in April, we appreciate the ongoing dialogue that we've had with state board staff, and we welcome the opportunity to work with the state board as you work on that alternative method. But again, at this time, since that is not in place, we would agree with Mr. McDowell and strongly encourage you to consider giving Independence Academy a null grade, as we've requested. And with that, I'll turn the microphone over to Marissa Gill, the head of school.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you all again. I appreciate your time. I really would just like to follow up on what John is saying and also let you know that any questions that you have for me, I'm more than willing to answer. I believe you've all seen our data, which I'm very proud of and I feel is very impressive, and you see what our students have accomplished, all the growth that they've demonstrated. I would like to add to, it isn't just that we're 100% special education. In addition to that, because of our very small school size, the accountability system just doesn't work for our school. So we get dinged in multiple ways. So for instance, the size of the school, the population of the school. Additionally, when you look at multiple measures, my students are allowed to remain in school longer, which means they may not graduate within 4 years. That's what my students need. That's what the law allows for. But the current accountability system holds all these different factors against my students, which really is a disservice and just not in the best interest of children. I want you to know I do not want lesser expectations for my students. I just want different expectations for my students, not less than. My students are smart, my students are capable. We have had amazing results, and you guys have probably more data than you want in front of you that shows you that. But I'm really hopeful that with the new piece of legislation, the language that was recently passed, and then inciting Damar Academy, if you were to look at our case and their case and the verbiage in those two documents, it's almost identical. And even our hearing officer was very clear in saying this may need to be reviewed again because this school likely qualifies. He wasn't quite as explicit in his instructions, and so that's why our hope was that if you heard the Damar, and it makes sense because he was with the Department of Education and he was more familiar with how explicit you might need to be in a ruling. I'm really hopeful that that carries some weight with you all, and that really helps to tie how similar the school and the mission and what we're doing at Independence Academy. And again, I'd like to say we are very unique. There's not a lot of schools out there that are doing what we're doing, but what we're doing is so important, and I can't tell you the impact that it makes in these children's lives. We did have a parent speak to you last time, but because I've now been in front of you a few times, I really just wanted to offer to answer any questions and really summarize the case for you again, and encourage you to please support us in this request.
Any questions? Cool.
Has staff changed their recommendation to the board?
No. The staff recommendation remains the same.
How many students are impacted by this if we were to accept the governor's recommendation?
So we always have between 30 to 40 students. Our classrooms are very small. We typically have 6 students in a classroom. So we sit right now, we're enrolling new students, but we would remain right around under the 40 student mark is my best projection at this point. We're a little early on in the year, but it does have a significant impact. And my fear is, if you are a child that needs a school like ours, if you are a family that needs a school like ours, and you see this letter grade that is not actually indicative of what we're doing. As a reminder, Maggie Pano came before you guys and put out a statement saying if you were to just calculate their actual growth and you had not a basic, because we qualify for proficiency, but we don't qualify for the growth points. So Maggie came and said if we were to calculate just on, hey, here's what the school's doing, they would have a C grade. And so she came to you all and explained that. So as I say, the accountability system, and I know you guys are working to change that, but it really just dings us in several ways that they're just not fair. In my opinion, it's just not right.
To summarize, this would have a negative impact on
Very much so. I
students,
apologize.
families, others in the community.
Absolutely.
And I guess my next question is for someone from the staff. I have some procedural questions. Tim, I guess, is coming up. Where are we with the rulemaking process? It seems it's been a while since we discussed this and requested that some standards be put forth.
Yes, very good question. So right now, we are pursuing, staff, the board, are pursuing rulemaking for both the alternative accountability, but also the standard accountability model, which is going to be something that there's a legislative created panel that's going to be looking at here in the near future. The rulemaking process is still in the initial phase, I would say, because it's not like we have any language we can reference yet or discuss. But I think it's very important to focus on that rulemaking aspect of this situation, because those rules, especially for an alternative alternative accountability, are designed in part to ensure that federal protections and requirements for certain student populations are in fact in place, and that those students are receiving the education that they're required to receive, and if necessary, being held to an alternative accountability model. Right now, those protections are not in place, which is why our recommendation, the staff recommendation, has remained unchanged, that the request for annul in this 8th ref appeal should be denied. One point I would like to stress is that, as you may recall, the board did grant the choice waiver request for independence in a previous board meeting, so the school will continue to be able to receive new choice scholarship students in the future. There is no impact as far as that's concerned with its grade. So those are really the points I wanted to hit on here. Just any other questions?
You mentioned compliance with federal law. What have they done that's not in compliance with federal law?
Well, I'm not suggesting that they've done anything that's outside of federal law. I'm simply saying that the point of having these rules in place that we are pursuing is to ensure that all students are being protected. I'm not suggesting that there's been anything done to put these students outside the protection of federal law.
Why would we penalize students and families because we have not done our part in this? They're in compliance with federal law unless you have evidence to present, which I don't think you do. I'm trying to figure out why we're going to penalize students and families when they've done nothing wrong. It's us who have not gone forward.
So I would not characterize this situation as penalizing them. There is an accountability model in place that has been applied to them, to this school correctly, according to the administrative decision. Now, whether or not that model needs to be updated and revised is something that this board is going to be considering here in the near future. But right now, the way the law is written, I would not say that they're being penalized outside of the law. They're simply being held accountable pursuant to the way the law is written.
So if we say no to this, then are we violating state law in any way?
When you say no, can you clarify what you mean by that?
If we don't accept your recommendation to deny this request, then are we breaking Indiana code in some way?
No, I would not characterize that determination or that decision as violating state law.
Just to shift one other question I have, the notion of special populations in schools have come up over the years, and one was the Crossroads, to be specific example. I think we made some accommodations. I don't really remember exactly what we did. But in those accommodations with other schools for special accommodations, how is this different than exceptions that we made in prior years?
So if I recall, Crossroads is really a different type of entity as far as the way that they are accredited and that they are held accountable under state law. I think that type of organization they do not receive an accountability grade, and that's a decision that the legislature has chosen to make. So I don't know if I would try to make that comparison between that type of entity and independence.
Can I ask
Just want to finish
sorry.
that I can't support the governor's recommendation to deny this appeal, so I'll be voting not to accept the governor's recommendation.
May I ask, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure that my understanding of the specific legal components of what you just described is correct. May I do that? Or Brian, is it better for you to come up and make whatever comment you want to make?
So just to be clear, this is not the governor's recommendation, this is state board staff recommendation. And this really centers around looking at special ed populations. And special ed students receive accommodations for the purpose that they achieve what this board values in an accountability rule. So there's funding and there's accommodations so that those students rise to the same level as any other student in Indiana. That includes proficiency on assessments, that includes CCR, that includes all of the things this board has put in an accountability rule that it values. Now, the comment I'd like to make about this board not promulgating a rule and should we give a null until the rule is promulgated, that is not the way rulemaking works. Under that theory, every student that is in the 1% most severely cognitively disabled should get an alternate diploma right now because the board just initiated rulemaking on the alternate diploma. So this is really important in looking at values and what we want to incentivize schools to do on behalf of students. This is not about harming students. This accountability rule is going to be very tricky because there are federal laws that expect us to hold schools accountable for special ed populations equal to every other student. And if we're not doing that, then we run the risk of running afoul of federal law. And there's a few assumptions I think that have been made today. Number one is that under an alternate accountability rule, that this school would even qualify. We don't know that because the board has not defined what a special population is for purposes of an alternate accountability rule. The second assumption that is being made is that I understand while they're different indicators, but that the grade would be higher. I would not assume that because we don't know. We don't know what that's going to look like. We also don't know when we have some rule language in place, when we get input from the USED, what input they may have. They may say, you can't do this. They may say this runs afoul of this, of IDEA or other federal law principles. So I want to make that clear. As far as Daymar goes, it's a different population. If their population has changed since it's been looked at previously, then I think we need to take a look at assigning them a grade.
Okay.
And we can look at that next time around.
Sorry, Byron, then Carrie.
I think in my mind, I'm analyzing this as its own issue, and with 1629 personally as one of the things that I look to on this, I move that we issue independents a null or no grade.
Second. Discussion, let's go. Carrie.
I appreciate the work that you do. It's very important. My school has a special ed population within our school. We are expected to be held accountable for them. We don't have the option of not including their grades within our grade, and so they are included in our grade. I know that that doesn't mean that they are our sole grade, but they are included in it. And so to consider that penalizing, the letter grade penalizing the families and the students who are currently held to our accountability system, I think kind of interjects that our accountability system is penalizing people, which I don't want to give that impression. I think it's partially, I would like to think of it in terms of we're encouraging, we're spurring people to action. We're trying to encourage people to grow under our system. They've been showing amazing growth. They've been doing impressive work. Would that have happened without our accountability system in place? We're still giving them the option to attend by allowing them to have choice scholarships. Fs harm every community. Any school who gets an F is harmed. I think that, again, we hold all other special ed students to a level of accountability, and to not hold them to that same level until we determine and establish a new rule, they are still should be judged by the same rules that all other public schools and all other special ed students are judged by.
May I?
Okay. Gordon?
Go ahead.
No, I guess what I wanted to say, and I appreciate it, and I want you to know, I've spoken with several of you, and I appreciate everyone's hard work on this. I guess what I would say is having some special education students is different than having all special education students. But set that aside, if you will. In addition to the population of students, we simply didn't receive points because of our size as well.
But everybody, when you say you got dinged, everybody gets dinged for something. Everybody could come to us and say, we have this student population, we have this student population, we don't have this, we don't have this. We could come up with an accountability, we could have 500 accountability systems for 500 different makeups of 500 different corporations. Currently, we have what we have. It's not fair, it's not perfect.
And I agree with that. I guess what I would say is if you are dinged in several ways and you do have such a small population, it truly is a lose-lose situation. And yes, we are showing tremendous growth and have been showing tremendous growth. So this choice waiver was a new thing that you all, had recently approved because we had suffered, for lack of a better word, although we don't have a huge choice population. I think last year we had 6 or 7 students. My point is more to that it was clearly defined, a statute for a school like ours, that there was meant to be an alternative accountability system.
No, we haven't determined that your school will meet it. So I want to watch that we say a school like yours, because until we set the parameters of what the alternative school is, we can't say that that is true. And so I want to caution that we say a school like yours, because it very well may be, but it also may very well not be. And so I caution you in saying that.
Okay. I guess what I would say is when you read the recommendation of our hearing officer and the other hearing officer, I think they both plainly state that in their opinion, our school would qualify under that statute, is my interpretation of that. And as John read to you from...
But again, that's not everyone's interpretation of it. And we haven't had hearing from U.S. Department of Ed who agrees to that. There are others. So
No,
I just
I
want to
understand.
caution you that that's not, and until we have the accountability rule in place, I don't want to say, that's why we're waiting until we have it in place. And until we do, we follow current rule.
Gordon?
I think this is an example of a case where oftentimes good people, good administrators, good schools come before us asking for something, and we have to make a policy decision on what's the best interest of the state. Not necessarily their individual situation or the students at their school, but what's in the best interest of the state. And I think in this instance, we can recognize the improvements you're making. And I think we did that when we used our discretion under state law to grant you choice waivers, which allow new students to continue using the choice scholarships, even though under the accountability system, we could have denied that and you couldn't have accepted any new students under the choice waiver. So I feel like this board, and honestly, I can't remember how I voted on that. There's a pretty decent chance I voted against that. But, sorry, but I'll have to go back and check the record. But this board granted that a huge, that's a big benefit to your school when it didn't have to. And I just feel that, our staff, our professional staff who has looked at this, first the hearing officer recommended denial. Our staff has looked at this issue in depth and studied it, and far more than any of us could. And they feel strongly about this. It's not a close call. They feel strongly that this board should deny the appeal. So I'm going to stick with, our staff, the hearing officer, and not create exceptions and confusion in state policy. And I feel strongly that we should follow the recommendations on our staff on this, as Brian and Tim described. Thank you.
I do want to echo Gordon's comments with the fact that I want you to know that there's a confidence from this board in the work that you're doing. There's an appreciation from this board for the work that you're doing. But that doesn't change the current law that we have in place. Is it perfect? No. Does it need work? Yes. But I feel like it is almost irresponsible of this board to not follow what we have in place until there is a new rule in place. And that's my opinion. But again, I don't want that to be conveyed as the fact that we don't appreciate the challenges that you have. I promise you I do. And the work that you're doing is great. And it's not recognized.
Thank you.
But we're making efforts to get there. But I still feel like there are things in place that we have to get things in place before we can change that rule.
Understood. Can I just clarify in reading part of, so our hearing officer did not recommend to deny, just to be clear. If I could just read, it says, however, should the school qualify under code 20-31-8-4.5, there should be alternative benchmarks, performance indicators, and accountability standards to be used in the assessment of the school. This has not occurred, and no explanation for why it has not occurred has been proffered. While the board properly followed its calculation, the assessment of the school is not complete if the school, under Indiana code, same code, was able to calculate an accountability category. So the hearing officer didn't recommend to deny. We only read the other hearing officer's language, hoping that it would more easily convey how they're exactly similar. The verbiage of what Damar had in their request in serving students with autism and our verbiage was nearly identical. So I think what our hearing officer did is left some leeway, whereas I felt like the former hearing officer, at no point did the hearing officer deny. Additionally, when we're speaking about ESSA, I just want to bring to your attention that we had a legal opinion from the Institute for Justice saying in no way would the state of Indiana be violating, which we have shared with staff, be violating ESSA in regard to our school, what type of school we are, what service we're providing, that there would be. So I think there's some disagreement with that opinion, but that's a lofty agency, very well-respected agency, so we have a legal opinion from them as well. So I just want to be clear in saying, number one, thank you, I appreciate you saying that, but number two, our hearing officer did not recommend to deny. He just left it a little vague, and I think that's how we ended up where we are now. Okay?
We have a motion and a second. Oh, sorry, Tony. Go.
Now, BJ, you said it's irresponsible for us to consider no grade for this particular incident. What I think is irresponsible, actually, is that this statutory language has been around since around 2013. We've had 6 years almost to do this and have not done it. That's irresponsible. And this is 100% special ed school. I mean, I don't know how you draw a definition of that doesn't include them. I think, the failure has been on us to have not come up with this alternative accountability system for these schools that do not fit, and trying to make an accountability system that really is problematic for all schools. Really, it needs to be overhauled totally. But try to force this school into that accountability system just makes no sense to me.
Here's what I would like to say. I apologize to you because we experience government pace every day. And so you are caught in the middle of that, which is unfortunate. From the department, we have to follow the policy. I think that's our responsibility. It's set by the board. If we want to change it, there are mechanisms in place to change it, but I feel your pain because it is, I agree with Tony, shame on us that it's taking this long to move that needle. So, but I just want to say I apologize to you that it is it's a painful process and it's a long process, and I know sometimes the staff's caught in the middle of that as well because it is a process. So having said that, I just want you to know, I mean, it is a responsibility of the department to follow those policies, but yet I understand the need to change and quickly, as quickly as we can.
Dr. McCormick, I really appreciate that, and I'm hopeful maybe this new 1629 may assist, but thank you for saying that. I really do appreciate it.
I just want to say, because we've thrown around lots of stuff, I still say, and this is one person's opinion, and I think Dr. Freitas asked for an opinion and got that we could do this. I still say that the General Assembly has given us the ability to be smart and think through these things and do the right thing. So that's why I believe that a lot of the discussion was not germane to this because we have the ability to do that. But that's one man's opinion, okay? So I just want to make sure.
Can I have I'm sorry, but I just want to make sure that my understanding of all these things is accurate, and having listened to a variety of different viewpoints, the remedy that we are speaking about, which is that 2031 8-4.5, is not currently available because the standards haven't been developed. So we're talking about pulling a lever that cannot be pulled because the lens, the filter through which we would apply it hasn't been built. So I think, for me, that's the guardrail. And so, that's why the hearing officer couldn't make that decision, because it could fit under that statute, but he can't give an analysis because it hasn't been completed. And so all the feedback everyone is sharing, hear all of it, but nothing can change that fact. And that's why I have to vote in order to not allow a null grade.
Can we speak at all to the new legislation that just passed? And John, you may have to bring it up. I don't have it with me. That 1629, can we talk about that language where it says maybe not a null, you have the ability to give a null grade and or a no grade, which was brought up at the last meeting, and I know you guys are so busy and don't remember, but at that time you guys didn't have the availability to give a no grade, which is different than a null grade. So this new piece of legislation that is passed, I do think allows for some additional freedom, because I would agree with what you've said. Yes, that statute has been in place since 2013. Nothing has been developed. I agree with you. However, I do feel that this new piece of legislation, 1629, and again, I don't have the exact wording, but I think it allows for the ability for you all to give a null grade or a no grade, and even either or, honestly. What I don't want, though, is a grade that does not reflect where my students actually are. And our grade currently does not truly reflect where they're at. So, and I don't, John, do you know that? Oh, Tim, thanks.
Just one quick point to the comment made regarding the new legislation. I think it's important to remember that the board would still have to adopt definitions through the rulemaking process to determine who would qualify for that kind of treatment. So I think it's important to remember that.
Okay, any other questions? We have a motion and a second. Byron, would you please repeat your motion?
I move to give them a null grade, to give independence a null grade.
And the second was Tony. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
No.
Mr. Hendry?
No.
Superintendent McCormick?
No.
Dr. McMahon?
No.
Ms. Moat?
No.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Wicker?
No.
Mr. Watts?
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to?
Motion to approve the staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve staff recommendation. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
No.
Dr. Freitas?
Present.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
No.
Ms. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on. Grace College Teacher Preparation Program is up next. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Grace College and Theological Seminary is seeking approval to offer a P12 Exceptional Needs Intense Intervention Graduate Level Instructional License Addition Program. And as you know, intense intervention programs are in high need in the state of Indiana. While we have 36 approved mild intervention programs, we only have 8 approved intense intervention programs. And according to our most recent licensing report, there were 32 initial intense license issued, but 80 emergency permits in this same area. And of the top 10 content areas by original emergency permits issued, intense intervention is ranked 6th. So we appreciate very much this proposal from Grace College and wholeheartedly recommend its approval. And we have Professor Cheryl Bremer, who's the chair of the Special Education Department at Grace College, here to answer any specific program questions you would like to ask.
Any questions with board members?
Cheryl, thanks for being with us today, and certainly it's a major need in the state of Indiana for you to put forward this program, so I personally appreciate you going forward with it. I read through the materials, very complete, very concise, and I almost have no questions to ask, but I will ask you one. What's innovative about your program? What distinguishes your program from the few others that we have in the state of Indiana?
Well, let me think about that for a minute. There's certainly we feel that in education, of course, much of what we do can't be innovative because of the standards that we want to meet, both at the state level and nationally as well. But we do try to meet at a much more personal level because of the size of our institution. And so we are able to work very, very closely with our local community schools. And we've actually had a chance to even spread out a little bit with that, with this program, bring in expertise from down here in Indianapolis, up northern Indiana, out to Fort Wayne areas. And so we're excited to see that much of what we're going to offer is really coming from all over the state. One thing I would say that I'm very excited about is that we are able to do a blended type program for our undergraduate students so that they would be able to pursue their dual licensure in elementary education, mild intervention, and then blend in this P-12 intense intervention license so that over the course of 3.5 to 4 years, a student can graduate with 2 special education license as well as elementary, which will help in all students in all settings as well.
Because this is a high-need program for the state of Indiana, what does the pipeline look like? Do you have thousands of students waiting to get in, or that's my hope.
I hope so.
I hope so.
have
but,
very
what's it look like?
excited superintendents knocking on my door, calling, when is this coming?
Really?
When can
Okay.
we? I actually spoke to somebody in Warsaw Schools that said, we have 2 right now, 2 openings that I've got to put an emergency license in. When are you starting? I said, well, let me tell you after Wednesday. So yeah, we have undergraduate students who are interested in coming. It's certainly a conversation I have with prospective undergraduate students, but also our program will be able, because it's online, our students, we will be able to issue allow them to take coursework while they're practicing teachers within that emergency license and gain that experience, clinical work, while they're in the field. So it should hit several different avenues and pipelines.
Thanks again for putting forth a program that, as I said before, is a high-need area. All those institutions out there in the state of Indiana, please put forward programs for high-need areas. There's some certificates we have a lot of students in, and maybe that's a discussion for another time in this board, but is it fair to be putting all these students into certain programs where we know there's not going to be any jobs? So maybe we need to sort of put a kibosh on certain programs. So we have the authority to do that, and those that are high need, maybe institutions would move in that direction to put forward programs that would address some of the high need areas. But thank you again.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and the second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Ms. Moak?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Congratulations. Good luck. Moving on to new business, action item C, Freeway Accreditation, International Leadership School.
So the board has a recommendation from staff to approve accreditation for International Leadership School. We've been working with them for several months. They've really presented some really good material. They have an excellent plan in place. This is a school that will operate in Fort Wayne. They have a good facility. They have really tapped into a niche where there's a lot of interest. They already have 52 students registered. So that's not an estimate. Students are actually interested. So we're recommending the board grant the request for freeway accreditation. The materials presented include a student parent handbook, staff resumes, a business plan, a budget, and then pictures of their facility.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Hendry?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Ms. Moak?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Up next, we have Freeway Accreditation for Basic Prep Academy.
So Basic Prep Academy comes before this board requesting freeway accreditation. They have been, they just completed a one-year period under Department of Education observation where they operated for the 1 year. They actually operated a year previous to that as well. I participated in a phone call with this, Mr. Littlefield, who's present, and the Department of Education staff, and based on the information that was obtained through that 1 year observation period and some other concerns, there's a joint staff recommendation not to accredit them. That would not prevent the school from going through another observation period at DOE if they so choose. With that having been said, Mr. Littlefield is here, and we've allotted 5 minutes for him to address the board. I've provided the board with all the materials from our staff, from DOE, and from Mr. Littlefield. So the board has all the information.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Dr. McCormick, it's a pleasure to be here. It's finally a chance to actually meet people that I visit with over the phone and through emails. And so this process has been an interesting one, insane. Brian gave me 5 minutes. You know, I'm glad I'm not a preacher, so I'd be kind of stuck on that. So I prepared something for the board just to kind of reflect on. And basically, I said we're in perilous times as it relates to virtual education. As noted from both political outcries and the state education performance ratings, when it comes to the plight of so many young adults leaving high school, education seems to be the equalizer. As such, I've dedicated my life to serving and being an advocate for the less fortunate. Nelson Mandela had a quote. He said, "There's no passion to be found playing small and settling for life that is less than what you're capable of living." BPA is seeking state accreditation for the last 2 years. However, the outcomes has not been favorable. I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you today to see the educational leaders who I've, again, only had phone conversation with and emails to convey our reasons for appealing the decision, not to recommend basic prep for state accreditation. I have 3 main concerns, reasons for not recommending basic prep for accreditation. Point 1, the ambiguity in the state requirements. Point 2, the clarity regarding the issues related to technical requirements, alignment with national standards and teacher interaction. Point 3, the lack of clarity in each of the bullets does not allow basic prep to truly rectify the issues notated. Similar issues was raised in 2018. However, it is the contention of Basic Prep Academy that their issues are in fact addressed either in the parent-student handbook or the employee handbook or within our freeway application itself. Additionally, from my research and conversations with other virtual schools, there appears to be inconsistencies to the state accreditation standards and the requirements that are applied. I also want to note that the last two bullets from the notice from the Indiana Board of Education regarding BPA's petition, it is indicated that the board has no previous record of accrediting virtual private schools in which we are, or adult high schools. However, in the accreditation process in 2017, 2018, these issues were not raised by the Indiana Department of Education. Therefore, given BPA's mission and model, which seeks to be an online school serving disenfranchised, non-traditional students, even if all other issues are rectified, the question I have, will we ever meet state requirements and standards? While we recognize there are areas that we can improve, Basic Prep Academy has worked hard the last 2 years to meet the state accreditation requirements. I respectfully request that you assess the information previously provided throughout the academic year and within our application, as well as the additional information I submitted to the board, and reconsider your recommendation and allow BPA to move forward in this accreditation process. In closing, BPA earnestly seeks to meet the educational standards and requirements that allow us to foster unique experiences in educating and preparing young Hoosiers for the 21st century. We take ordinary people and give them extraordinary ideas. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Any questions by board members? Seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion is to,
Accept the recommendation, sorry.
Second.
so we have a motion to accept staff recommendation and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Ms. Moe?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
To the board? In terms of you reviewing the information, is there any recommendations or as you see it? I know virtual schools have kind of come on hard times, so I'm just going back and possibly going back through the process again. I would be very open to hear what and why the vote.
I'm sure as a department, we would be happy to work with you. Maggie would be happy. I'm sure board staff would be happy to sit back down and have more further conversation with you. So there will be opportunity for that, absolutely.
Well, I know Robin mentioned in terms of campus improvement, in terms of just really engaging with the process. It's real, I think, difficult, the letter, I think, kill it, but the spirit give life. And where we've lost, 13 to 14, in terms of percent, that we had a graduation rate of 80%. So that's 14% of the kids, 12% of the kids that every year since we started in 2009 that we're losing. And the accountability of those students goes where? We've done what we can for traditional schools, but non-traditional students is what I'm really speaking of, and where we find means to educate those students. So I would like to present, have the board make notation of that. That would be real important for me. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much. Turned Around Academy Fund Distribution.
We have 2 public comments.
Okay. Before we get into the public comment, I do want to make note that I will be recusing myself as the EVSC of the Hope School Corporation is on this with number 1. So when we get to number 1, I'm going to step away and Kate's going to run the meeting.
And I will recuse from number 2.
Can we take a break?
Let's take a break. We'll take a break first. Tell you what, we're going to take a break right now. We'll reconvene. It's 10:20. We'll reconvene at 10:30 to do Turn Around Academies. Is that okay? Thank you.
That was 3 wows.
So,
Wow.
you don't have a presentation unless we have questions.
My dad's cross, farm
There you go.
So we good?
Oh, yeah. He's Army, but that's okay. This was the old student. This was guys that bring this class. That should not be one more year. It goes fast.
So we have Turnaround Academy Fund Distribution. Are there questions by board members? Oh, I apologize.
Good morning, Chairman Watts,
Good morning.
members of the State Board of Education. Thank you for allowing some public comment on the proposed Turnaround Academy funding. I was preparing and reviewing the materials for this meeting the other day, and I was kind of looking at the two different proposals. I'm sort of doing some interpretation. It looks like there's maybe two different proposals for the funding. My concerns and input are sort of on the other side. As I read and studied the issue, all the dollars that we look at for our turnaround schools is coming from Title I. From the information provided, we slice off a percentage of Title I, and we say, okay, these are our schools that are in need of some sort of comprehensive school reform, and then we're going to do some SIG grant funding, and that's where we get our funds for the turnaround schools. Well, my input is based on the other side of the equations. There's maybe 100 other schools out there that are looking to improve, located all across the state. Their comprehensive school reform plans need support too. And so when you look at the two funding options, one option looks like it's going to have about $6.6 million left over for the other schools. And the other option has a lot less dollars, available for the other schools because more is being sort of piled on one school. There's a big difference, about $1 million difference in some funding recommendations. And I'm not here to pick on one school. I'm just saying, let's look at the entirety of the state as we're trying to fund and prevent schools from going further into academic decline. I would advocate putting the most dollars possible forward to help the most number of schools possible. So that's my public input.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Marcotte.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
My name is Dr. David Marcotte, and I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Urban Schools Association, and I'm here to lend support to the Turnaround Academy funding proposal from the Department of Education. Equity is a primary focus of the Urban Schools Association. It has been through the entire legislative session, and it will be in the future. And the proposal from the Department of Education, as Chris just mentioned, leaves more funds on the table to be available to more students in our state who would be in desperate need of those funds. Essentially, that is my public comment, is that I agree with Chris that the proposal from the Department of Education, which leaves more money available to be distributed to other schools, is the proposal that the Urban Schools Association certainly supports. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Any questions by board members? Tony?
Really more of a comment. I want to join in with some of what I just heard from the two public comments in agreeing that I would also like to see an expansion of schools that are being considered for SIG funds, specifically D-rated schools. We have a lot of D schools that may not qualify on what used to be old federal grad rate, but aren't really getting any of the SIG funding. Whereas if we look at what we've done this year, we had 20 B and C schools that got SIG funding, but we have D schools here that can't get SIG funding. Now, even a lot of those probably letter grade B, letter grade C schools that got just under $500,000 in funding, probably as of today wouldn't even be eligible now that we've changed our graduation rate definition. But we need to get more of that money to the schools that could really benefit. And I think to just focus on the F schools to the exclusion of the D schools is a mistake. I would like to see the D schools also be eligible, but for certain, I think SIG funding should not go to schools that have a state accountability letter grade of a B or a C, as they did this year.
From the department, we had concerns. We have less money coming in federally in that SIG area, but a higher percentage, 53% of it, going to selective 25 schools. And although they are in desperate need, and we agree that they need that extra funding per pupil, and we can all have that conversation, there's never enough, we are worried about the other 100+ schools that are going to receive zero or less than that amount. So what we're trying to do, as Gordon said earlier in his comments, we're here to serve the best interest of the state, not a pocket of the state, but all kids. And as we try to have justification to those schools who are CSI, that are Fs, that are struggling, what do we tell them? We tell them that this big bucket of money, 53% went to 25 schools, and 100 schools are left with less than half of that money. And so and I understand why we have to react. I understand the board's responsibilities with those schools, but I also understand the board's responsible for all schools. And I think being proactive would be appreciated from schools. It's just hard to, in my mind, to justify the dollars, the amounts, not necessarily the service to those schools, but the amounts that are going out this year. So that's why our recommendation looked different from the staff's.
I have a question. When we speak about there's 100 schools that will not receive funding,
Will not receive funding. They will either, depending on what happens to that funding, they will receive zero or they will receive less because we have less money to give them. And there's more schools that need it. So as those identified schools become more, which we knew would happen, and even with that grad rate change, you take that out of the mix, we're still at about 100. So because of that bucket of money got less from the feds, but we're giving more to those identified schools that the board has identified, or the board staff has identified for the turnaround efforts, which I understand. Our argument is, well, I'm not saying don't fund them. I'm not saying that at all, because they need dollars as well. But there are 100 other schools that this board, in my opinion, also has the responsibilities to be proactive and make sure that we are providing them with, we have resources, services. Even if in the end we adjust that and they receive 0, we still have some supports because they're going to need it. We can't afford it. We can't support them all to the level we need to afford it. There's just not enough federal money. But it's just hard to justify less money coming in and more money going out, and there's more to be served. It's just tough when we're responsible for every child in the state of Indiana, not just pockets.
Where does the 6.8 million left over unused go for next year?
It has been obligated.
Is that in those, that's in, not
No,
in those
that's already
numbers?
been obligated to CSI schools.
So
Comprehensive, the schools that have been identified as eligible, that's already been obligated.
Okay.
So that can't be in that denominator.
So would part of those be of those 100 schools that we're talking about not being able to be served?
all of those schools would be.
Okay.
But that's a different year of money. So
But
when you're
those-
talking which schools, you got to remember that was for a specific year of service. And Nathan, do you want to explain that a little better? Because I think that is confusing, but that money's been obligated for.
Right, so it is complex, and I get.
I'm not confused, I was just asking.
Okay.
So just so you know.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
So it wouldn't be all of the 100 schools, those would be the minimum. So there would be additional schools. So we will be identifying brand new CSI schools this year that currently we don't know. So the big picture is, we have the current 100, but there are going to likely be more. So that's one piece of it. The 6.8 million also is it's not unused, is the fact that we're taking advantage of what ESSA allows, which is multiple years. So ESSA allows multiple years, up to 4 years. So we're just providing more time to spend the money. So that 6.8 million was allocated this year because we're required to allocate at least 95% of it. And so the fact that, we're counting it in the distributions this year. The fact that they have more time is why we're stating it shouldn't be counted twice, this year and next year.
So are those funds for the 18-19 or 19-20 school year?
18-19, so they've already been allocated to the schools, so we've obligated those dollars. They can be used right now. So the schools are working on their revised school improvement plans, and many of them are wrapping those up. So we're anticipating that summer PD, possibly other efforts, a ramp up of services for next school year, this fall, bringing teachers back early to try and revise curriculum. All of those things are possible to be happening now. We're providing them the same amount of time that we, no matter which version you approve, which I do want to point out, our attempt was to not even have a presentation today. Our attempt was to have consensus. So we did, I do want to make sure that that was clear, but we're providing them the same amount of time, whether it's the Turnaround Academy schools or the schools that we're talking about that are not, the time period is the same.
So when we talk about 100 schools, how many of those 100 received? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm using that number.
Yeah.
How many of those schools received funds from the 6.8 million?
How many?
Because for us to say that we're not funding those schools is inaccurate. We are.
May I make a request?
If I can get an answer to that question first, though, how many of those, the 100-ish schools received funds from the 6.8 million?
The ones that we currently know, all of them. But in October, when you all vote on grades, we're going to have new ones. So, we have to, that big picture of making sure there's dollars protected so that we have new schools.
To say that we're not funding 100 schools, we have funded those schools, correct?
To a certain level, yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
The comment was, some will receive, those that I identified could get 0 or less because that pot of money is less. At no time did I say we didn't fund any of those 100 schools.
Can we please display slide 4 of the state board memo? Because I just want to make sure I'm tracking, because it visually represents, I think, the conversation that's happening right now.
Okay.
In terms of, and I just want to confirm that I'm tracking correctly with the conversation that's being had. Okay, Ron's pulling that up, so when we can move on, but it does graph out the number of schools and whether they are a B, C, D, or F school. And I think that visual representation is helpful for the verbal conversation that we're having.
Well, while they're getting that together, I just have a comment about the result of it, because at the end of the day, the largest allocation went to Bedford Lawrence. I hate to pick on them, but Bedford Lawrence High School at $245,000. So the largest SIG allocation of that 6.8 went to a B school, where Frankie McCullough School in Gary, only got $45,000, and they're an F school. So using student population as the means of allocating those funds, yes, I think is really problematic. I do want to thank Nathan for walking through some of this with me before the meeting, but I'm really hoping next year, once we take care of the turnaround academies, that all the rest of this SIG money would be given on a competitive basis. I mean, they should at least have to apply or ask for it. And it should really go to just DNF schools.
Is that a motion?
No.
Nathan, do you want to address that?
Yeah, so I understand your point. Legally, we can't do that. So I'll walk you through
can't
why.
do what part?
We cannot only give it to F schools, and I'll tell you why. So this page that State Board memo provided for you, many of the schools that are in B, C, and D that are up there, actually all of the schools that are B, C, and D that are up there are because of a provision in ESSA that says that we must identify high schools as CSI based upon their grad rate. So you all have approved an accountability model that grad rate is one component. So they could get an A, but have a grad rate that's quite a bit worse than someone else, who's a C, because there are multiple factors that play into that. I also would like to point out that, the Department of Ed asked for a waiver to not even allocate money to high schools at all, according to grad rate and exclusion of the state. So Tony Walker, I would say we agree with you. We asked the federal government to not do what occurred, and it was denied. Federal government denied it. So I think the legislature helped us out because they moved to one diploma, and this issue is not going to take hold in future years. I think future years, because the legislator fixed this anomaly, I would anticipate we wouldn't have any B's or C's up there. I think also I would point out, the Department of Ed recommendation is also based upon, I think if you laid side by side, we agree for the most part with state board staff. The numbers are very similar or the same. The main difference that we have is the turnaround school operators. And to your point, we also are not necessarily interested in funding B's and C's either. CSUSA has 2 C's of the 3. So if we're talking about overall grades and our interest in reducing, 7 years of funding, $30 million going to 4 schools when 2 of them are currently C's, plays into our recommendation of greatly reducing theirs because they've had their time, so that we can support schools who haven't had that chance and also need the support.
We know it's difficult because we understand to show that improvement and then to maintain it is not free. I mean, it's expensive. And so when we look at the additional dollars per pupil, when we broke that down, it's significant. Our concern is, which we want those schools to continue to do well. We talked about at Trine, if you remember, the conversation was you have to start weaning them off. I think Byron brought up, you got to start weaning schools off as they get toward the end of those so they can self-sustain. So having said that, and looking at the picture of those schools that are coming into this, I mean, I think the goal of the board is not to continue to have takeover status. And so, and it's hard. I understand it because we understand the importance of funding to maintain good progress, but yet you got a lot in need that are coming up the pike.
While we're looking at this graph, I just want to again ask a clarifying question. So you see in the right-hand corner, 2 ways to be identified as CSI. If you are identified on that grad rate designation, and you were talking about how high schools, that's the indicator, does that mean they have to receive financial support, or can they receive some other kind of support within that designation?
Right.
There's discretion there, right?
There is discretion. I mean, that's, the ESSA plan is driving a lot of what we're doing. I want to point out one other piece, because yes, I also think in competition, this year was also an anomaly because it was the first year of the ESSA plan, first year CSI for everybody. So our ESSA plan says that we need a planning grant to identify, in order to fix what is currently not working, we first have to know, well, what is it that's not working? So we required everybody to do a planning opportunity. Next year, the money that, whatever money is left over that you all, whatever you approve from the total, the money that's left over, it is going to be competitive, and we are going to prioritize. And because we're in the second year of the plan and people are in the implementation phase. So you will see high schools that are B's and C's are not going to get preference. The competitive preference is going to be those of strongest need. First year, we were committed to supporting everyone. Also think some of those B's and C's, they've got 3 times the rate of dropouts or general diploma as a school that didn't fall into that category. So I think your commitment to improving college and career readiness for kids, we know general diploma isn't getting us there. So there is a lot of work that those B's and C's and D's schools have to do, and not just, that they have a good rating and everything's fine.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So Nathan, if we have a D school that doesn't meet the federal criteria based on grad rate,
right,
is that D school going to be eligible for funding next year from SIG?
No. Big picture, the reason why that was not included in the ESSA plan was, economy of scale. So we know we have to identify high schools, and we have to identify at least the bottom 5%. And we're coming before you to try and protect the number that's left for everybody else. If you add, twice as many schools, the situation is going to be even more dire of asking for even further reductions to the turnaround academies. So, the decision was made but beyond the turnaround academies, we're going to prioritize the minimum that the law requires. The Title I Fs or bottom 5%, and then the high schools that have the grad rate. If we expanded that definition, it's going to exacerbate the economy question of, how much money should go to the turnaround academies so that we have money for everyone else that's identified.
Well, I'm looking a little long range here because the turnaround academies are winding down contractually. So is it a DOE policy that is not permitting D schools to participate in SIG?
It is an SCA policy in the ESSA plan, so yes.
Any other questions on board members? Seeing none, is there a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Say it again.
So, are we taking these separately?
I just want to thank you all for your time. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you.
I meant to say thank you for calling me up to speak, and I forgot to say that at the beginning.
Thank you.
So
I apologize.
I appreciate your time.
I thought the funding for remaining schools was up top, so I'm gonna turn this over to you.
Okay. So we are ready now. Are you going to step out, or are you just?
Should I?
Go ahead. You're fine. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't move.
Thank you
just wanted to make sure I was doing what you needed me to do. Okay. So now we're ready for new business action E, letter I, Evansville Schools.
Move recommendation.
Second.
So which recommendation?
Yeah. Can you state?
You state
There
yes.
is a
But
There's two,
DOE or
always board staff, and then the DOE, so which one would you like to
Move the board staff recommendation.
Second.
I
Discussion?
thought we just talked about.
And this is just item one right
This
now,
is-
right?
Yes, for
I'm
clarification.
making
And
sure for
Does
my,
the motion need to be stated with that
Yeah,
level of
can someone state
specificity?
with some specificity what we're voting on?
So are we only voting on Evansville right now?
That's
correct.
correct.
So we're not voting holistically on the plan?
No.
that was my understanding.
This is a procedural matter. The chair has recused himself from subpart I of the overall funding and then Dr. Ernest has recused himself from, I believe it's subpart 2 of the funding. So that is why we are, that's why the motion is specific to Evansville at this time.
So Dr. Freitas, and correct me, Brian, if I'm misstating, but it sounds like we need a motion with that level of specificity. So could you restate? So what I mean by that is that we're talking about the board staff memo specifically for subpart I for Evansville schools, and you have a motion related to that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And we have a second for that motion, Mr. Gastineau?
And I have a question.
Okay.
So I'm trying to frantically find it here. I am assuming that the Evansville was the same on both recommendations. Can we clarify that, please? I think it was.
I think the amount of, is that what you're asking, Dr.
Am I hearing
McCormick?
yes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's what I need to know.
So we have a motion and a second discussion?
Can staff just give a summary of what it is we're voting on? Because everyone doesn't know, everyone does not know what the staff recommendation is. I mean, if you're watching this on TV, or probably several people in the audience don't know what it is we're talking about. So if we can just get a summary of the substance of what the motion addresses.
So I think the intent for subpart 1 is to address all turnaround academies associated with the Evansville-Vanderburgh School Corporation, which would include the Transformation Zone in Evansville, which covers 3 turnaround academies within the district, as well as the new and recently approved intervention for the Academy of Innovative Studies, one which we are all very excited about, the RAMP program. So it's 4 turnaround academies across 2 interventions, all within Evansville-Vanderburgh Community School Corporation.
Anything further on that? Any other discussion? Roll call?
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas? Yes. Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Ms. Moe?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Watts has been recused. Motion carries.
Moving on to CSUSA schools. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Well, okay.
Motion to,
Mr. Chair, I will say Madam Chair, but you're back, right? Mr. Chair, can staff give a summary of the recommendation before we entertain a motion?
Briefly, as a procedural matter, please note that Dr. Ernest has recused himself from this particular matter.
As Nathan mentioned, this is one of the interventions where there is a deviation between the budgeted amounts listed in the board memo and the recommendation from the department. I'll speak specifically to the board's memo. It is for all 3 turnaround academies currently operated by Charter Schools USA. The amount in the board's memo was derived after a careful and thorough review of their existing 1003 applications from this previous school year. I'll give one quick example. They have historically supported summer school with their 1003, which is absolutely an allowable and I think important intervention for a turnaround school. Given that we anticipate the schools earning a charter as of July 1, they will no longer be able to use these funds after June 30 next year. So summer school is not a realistic expense for this upcoming school year. So that's one example of a strategic reduction that we recommended. In addition, we took into account that the schools would qualify, should they earn a charter, for the $750 per pupil charter and innovation grant that the state offers. So we also looked into reducing the amount strategically and purposefully, but also in recognition that they're going to have a new funding stream. And this was a big part of the transition conversations that Dr. Freitas will likely recall when we talked about financial sustainability. The addition of new funding, $750 per pupil, the reasoning there was not drop them so far that they go below what they're going to get next year, have to cut services for 1 year, and then add them back in. I'll also add that the number reflected on the board memo represents a 26% reduction over last year, but a 56% reduction from what the school received in 14-15. And each year, this board has reduced the amount to the turnaround academies operated by CSUSA since that date, 14-15. So this has been a strategic and purposeful process, and that's how we derived the number on the board's memo.
And Ron, what's that total been over the last 7 years for them?
I think you mentioned it. I have a number
I don't have it in front of me. I think
Nathan mentioned 30 across all of them. I believe CSUSA is just above 20 million, and I'd be happy to speak more to that number if you wish.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the SBOE staff funding recommendation for Charter School USA.
Second.
While we're discussing Charter School USA, could someone from the schools give us an update on the charter, the status of the charters? I know that doesn't particularly.
Can we vote before we do that? Is that okay? Yeah. Can we vote? Let's vote on the motion and then we'll get an update. Brian, roll call, please.
Yeah, showing Dr. Ernest recused. Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
No.
Okay.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Ms. Moe?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Wicker?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And I'll just withdraw that.
You're
I noticed I overlooked the presentation that's coming up, so.
So if you would just be sure to
apologies.
include that request in your presentation if you haven't. Okay.
Jump the gun.
Moving on to funds to remaining schools. Is there a motion?
Can we get a summary of that?
Apologize, yep.
Summary?
Ron.
Yeah, so each of the remaining schools, each of the remaining interventions reflect turnaround academies and sometimes systems level interventions that the board has approved over the past about 5 years, I believe. All these fall within the last 5 years. Each of these remaining schools has an approved, but not committed to, 5-year strategic budget that gradually declines each year over a 5-year period. That was a recommendation from the turnaround experts that the board contracted with back in 2014, was to develop this strategic process, commit schools early on to a gradual reduction. So the numbers reflected for the remaining schools, other than Edison Roosevelt, which is one of the turnaround school operators that we've been gradually reducing strategically each year, are all already published in their approved State Board of Education intervention plans. Once again, the board has not committed to those, but the school and the board have kind of come to a shared understanding that that is what it will take to fully support the intervention.
For the benefit of the audience, can you just specify what schools we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. So first is Indianapolis Public Schools, which has a transformation zone that has 2 turnaround academies, Northwest Middle School and Arlington Middle School. And that intervention includes an additional 6 K-6 elementary schools that feed into those 2 buildings, really thinking about this system of support. They are currently in their they're going into their 3rd formal year as a transformation zone. Next is Kokomo Public Schools. The board approved that intervention last year. They have 3 turnaround academies. They are implementing a transformation zone as well and going into their first full year of implementation. That's why there's a slight uptick. Although we did carefully review that and identify some ways that we could reduce that, even though they're going into their first year of implementation. It's not a ton, but in order to fully implement, but also be responsible, we did find a little bit there. Next is South Bend Community School Corporation in the Empowerment Zone. Extremely excited about this model, probably one of the most transformative models we've approved thus far as a board post 11-12. They are going into their first year of planning / implementation. They don't really have time to plan because they've changed so much that they really need to plan and fly at the same time. So really excited about that intervention. And that reflects a reduction based on some of the $6.8 million that we discussed, which was distributed in March of 2019. So can access when they submit the paperwork, but no earlier than March of 2019. So we're assuming they're gonna use that money next year, 1920. We've actually reduced their request by the net of what they have already received from the department. Again, we've collaborated throughout this with the department to try to come up with as strategic of a recommendation as possible. Candesia Academy, which is an innovation school, again, one of the most transformative models, been celebrated nationally as a transformative turnaround model, and Indiana's really been put on the map for it. They are in their 3rd year and are going into their 3rd year of intervention. And Roosevelt College and Career Academy, Edison Learning, is one of the original turnaround school operators. They are winding down their intervention. They've transferred over to an innovation school. My conversations and our conversations with Edison have been very frank to say, similar to Charter Schools USA, although we re-upped your 5-year timeline, your commitment and reliance on these school improvement grant funds needs to dramatically reduce. And so this recommendation reflects cutting the number of staff members they support through this grant in half. Now, that doesn't mean those staff members should go away. What it is it's dramatically encouraging them to find alternative ways to fund them or more efficient ways to accomplish that work. It's not to say the work doesn't need to be done, but you just can't rely on this funding source to continue to fund personnel positions. They're supposed to build capacity and then either go away or find an alternative method. So that's it.
Thank you. Yeah. Ron, can I ask you a question about that?
Of course.
So our TZ plans are we mentioned the 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But ESSA allows for 4.
Yeah.
So going forward, it's just something to think about.
Yeah, and I think what
I know Nathan's concerned about that, and I
Yeah.
know when we go to the US Ed conversations, they are advising us differently than the conversations here.
Yeah.
So for what that's worth, because just a reminder to the board, we have been in that situation from the department where we have had funds that, prior to me, that had funds that were not distributed correctly, and we are still withholding those from the feds that we're not given those. I mean, it's a cut, but it's a withholding. So it's not like you can just play with this. So I'm just letting the board know so that down the road, if it comes up and someone says, no one told us, I'm telling you. So
Do you mind if I give
the 4-year plan needs to, and we can sit and chat with you. I just think that needs to be, since it's not us, it's the feds.
Mm-hmm.
We probably need to pay attention since you have TZs on a 5-year plan and 4 years is what's allowable for the funding piece. So that alignment is going to be interesting. Just
Do you mind if I respond briefly?
Sure,
Not in a retort, but just in
Sure.
additional information. Dr. McCormick is absolutely correct. It's something that the department proactively waived to us, and we greatly appreciate that. The 5-year model is based on the state law, which requires the board to revisit these interventions after 5 years. And so that's the only thing I wanted to add and appreciate and look forward to the conversations so that we can align those two so that we don't end up in a situation like we are today.
Ron, I have a question on page 2 of the memo where it's per pupil funding 1920. That might be page 3 or so. You see?
Yes, sir, that's the Department of Education's memo.
Yeah. It shows each of the school corporations, Evansville, and per pupil funding is $848 per pupil. And then it goes down to $325.64 for IPS. Then it goes up to $1,460 for Kokomo.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain why it goes from $325 per student in some and $1,500 in another?
Yes, sir. So I would say 2 different things. One is an equity decision. I'm not sure, I think we should definitely look at this information. I'm not sure that variance is like prima facie a problem. It's about providing every school what they need to succeed. And all of these schools have had an approved plan by this board that reflects these per pupils. Now, the reason you see the large variance is because of the different point at which each school is in their intervention. So for example, Evansville, although that particular intervention has existed for a while in the transformation zone, the inclusion of Academy of Innovative Studies brings that number up a bit because that is a pretty small school, and they are in the very first year of implementing a comprehensive reform, truly transforming what school looks like for the students in that building, which is really what I'm passionate about and what I think this board should almost require. So that's why that one went up. If it was just the TZ, I think the number would be a little bit lower. Indianapolis Public Schools, they're in their going into their third formal year of their TZ, but that transformation zone has existed prior to the state law going into place. So they're really probably in their fourth year, and so that's why that one's lower. Charter Schools USA, again, going into their final year of intervention. Edison Learning, similar situation, have been operating the school since 12-13. And Kokomo Public Schools is disproportionately higher than the others, and I would say it's justified because they are going into their first year of implementation, and they are supporting the extended learning time, which means paying staff, as we heard at the update up north last month. They are paying a lot of staff fully out of SIG in this first year, but the plan, as we mentioned, it shows they've made a commitment. We are going to fund this intervention through locally derived sustainable funds. And so we've kind of insulated ourselves from folks coming back and saying, well, we need more. It's like, well, then we have a problem with the intervention because you told us up front that you were going to be able to do it. And then we can have those conversations which are different and really informed.
My other question deals with sustainability. We're pumping millions and millions of dollars into these, and those who are early on, obviously it takes 2, 3, maybe 4 years to turn around a school. But have you seen districts that are further down the road create a system and infrastructure to continue these improvements once the state money runs out?
So I think Evansville, Vanderburgh Community School Corporation, with their transformation zone, will speak specifically to that during their presentation. I would say that we always obviously encourage that. I can't speak specifically, I don't want to steal Evansville's thunder. I could speak specifically to theirs. I don't have any off the top of my head right now, but I know that is something we are continuously discussing, especially as it relates to personnel. We have my next step, we've got performance benchmarks in place. One of my next steps on behalf of the board is to really develop a robust financial accountability piece to determine how reliant are they on SIG funds, temporary funds, to support personnel. Because that's that's 100 miles an hour to zero when you can no longer pay that person. They just go away. And that's a big issue. So we do see that, we talk about it. I can't pinpoint specifically anything right now.
I would ask you to really look at that as we look at future funding. Also, as we look at future funding, if you're not using the criterion of success, that students' performance is improving, that would certainly impact my support or non-support for more money. I'm okay with stable money, even money every year for a district that's really doing well, or maybe a little more money. But those who are not seeing the successes, I think we need to reevaluate whether or not the money we're investing is wise to be used for the purposes they promote.
Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify, this per pupil on Charter School USA was based on our recommended funding, which is about half. So that number is significantly higher if you go with the state board recommendation. We went with that low number thinking you're saying what you just verbalized, this is the end, so wean them off. So we went with the consistency of the other schools who were in that situation. That's why those mirror that. Now, since if the board's going with a much higher number, that higher number per pupil is going to be much higher. So I don't want the board to be confused. Can I ask, I know we had conversations with each schools and had a very collaborative conversation. There were some schools that asked for less money than we're giving them. Walk me through that.
Yeah, I respectfully wouldn't characterize it as asked for less money.
Or verbalize they could operate with less money.
The request we made to each school was, we know that everything in your plan is a need to have. And the message was explicitly, in the event that we are unable to justify fully funding the budgeted amounts, what could you absolutely, what is not absolutely critical to the success of your intervention? And so we did receive some responses from schools. It is State Board's interpretation that given the $6.8 million that was referenced earlier was distributed in March of 2019, there was really no reasonable or responsible way to use that during the 18-19 school year, and many schools would use it, and in reality, many schools won't have access to it until after July 1, which is into the 1920 school year, that money was kind of considered as a part of the funding available for 1920, and therefore we're able to fully fund and justify fully funding the budgeted amounts. So the request, again, was if we had to, what could you absolutely do without? However, we also recognize that the plans that they submitted to the board were were thoroughly vetted, thoroughly thought out, and kind of demonstrated strategic approach that we want to support.
Yeah, and I have no question those plans are solid. I have confidence in our team and your team and the local teams. I don't question the plans. Just when the total pot gets cut and we have schools that we know are going to be in need and schools that are signaling, we don't like it, but we could operate with X amount less, I struggle with that. And I understand decisions are made, but it's just a hard one for me to wrap my mind around.
If I could give the details of your initial response to Dr. Freitas for CSUSA,
Sure.
per pupil, because you are correct, and for some reason that slipped my mind. So Dr. McCormick, is correct. The number for CSUSA is plus or minus about $1,000 per pupil. So I do want to make sure that's very clear. I don't have the number off the top of my head for Edison, but I assume it's somewhere close to that. And again, that is informed by the fact that they're going to have access to a $750 per pupil new funding source, sustainable funding source, when they become a charter school after the 1920 school year, if and when they become a charter school after the 1920 school year. So this is an attempt to reduce, but not reduce so much that we cut below what they are going to have in 2021, because then we'd just cut services temporarily and they would just come right back the next year, which didn't seem as strategic for board staff as we would like.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Can I just express appreciation to Ron and to Nathan? And I had heard from them that it was a collaborative effort and communication was good between board staff and DOE staff, and I appreciate that.
Good. Is there a motion? Please.
Move staff recommendation.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And just for clarification, State Board of Education staff.
State Board of Education staff.
And BJ, can you please, for clarification as well, talk about, are those equal dollars now that we're dealing with, or is there a discrepancy so that everybody knows? For the remaining schools that we've not voted on, you with me? Just for clarification.
Check me. If I heard the question correctly, it was asking where is there alignment between the two recommendations and where is there
Of the
not?
remaining schools, because we've already voted on.
Yep.
Three? Two?
You from memory? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so Edison, Roosevelt, those two are discrepant in State Board staff, Department of Ed staff. The other ones, IPS is the same. Kendesi is slightly different, but substantially similar. South Bend is slightly different, but substantially similar. And Kokomo is the same. So the two that are or the three that are different that have not been voted on, Edison is quite different, and then the other two, Kendesi and South Bend, are a little bit different.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gaskell?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yeah.
Mr. Lieutenant McCormick?
No.
Dr. McMahon?
Yes.
Ms. Moak?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Whipper?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving into discussion, I'm going to turn this one over to you to ZVSC. Just shut it off this way. Okay.
Perfect. We're now ready for discussion. Item A, school quality review report. I'm sorry, we already did that. B, turnaround academy update, subpart 1, Evansville Transformation Zone.
Hi. Good morning, State Board of Education and Superintendent McCormick. I am Kelsey Wright, EVSE Director of School Transformation, and I'm glad to be here today to present an update on behalf of 3 turnaround academies, Kays Elementary, Glenwood Leadership Academy, and Lincoln School, who the Office of Transformational Support is proud to serve as internal state-approved intervention. I'm going to start with our metrics just so you know as we're going through what it is that we've been tracking. So when drafting our metrics for our 5-year plan, we wanted to be mindful to represent the whole school beyond only tested grade levels, as well as both academics and culture climate for a more well-rounded picture of school improvement. Our goals for suspensions were to decrease the number assigned by 20%. 10% from the 15-16 baseline to year 2, and another 10% from year 2 to year 5, to increase the time students are in school and in our classrooms. Goals for the percent of students meeting or exceeding NWEA growth projections were set strategically by digging into the NWEA growth data of schools in EVSC who either dramatically improved their school grade or consistently in a school. We took the highest growth metrics of that baseline sample from EVSC's first year with NWEA in 16-17 to set our year 5 goal and backwards mapped year 2, splitting the difference. I-STEP metrics were selected using the same line of thinking as NWEA and also split the difference between the year 5 goal and the 16-17 baseline. Breaking down each metric by turnaround academy, we've hit our year 2 goal of reducing out-of-school suspensions by 10% in 2 of the 3 schools. And more notably, we have already surpassed the year 5 goal with an approximate 30% reduction to date. The decrease in suspensions that you see in these turnaround academies from the year 1 baseline are heavily attributed to the proactive district work led by EVSC's Director of Neuroeducation and internal school champions, educating leaders and staff on social-emotional learning rooted in the work of Dr. Stuart Shanker. As turnaround academies, we are able to leverage the intervention funds to embed social-emotional learning specialists and interventionists within the schools to offer this expertise and support with a greater intensity. EVSC's work in this area has been supporting teachers to recognize the difference between students' misbehavior and stress behavior and develop self-awareness to recognize the state of calm, remain calm, and get back to that state as quickly as possible. When students are not in this calm, alert state, they are dysregulated, which makes learning and responding appropriately to any stressors challenging. What we're finding is that many of the students we serve are not aware of what it feels like to be calm. This is occurring in part because of a high stress load due to the challenges families living in poverty face on a daily basis with housing and food insecurities. We know the students we serve in our priority schools have a higher number of adverse childhood experiences, which is why we are building in buffers to mediate the impact of toxic stress they might experience. And while this is slow work, it's the right work. To tackle this problem from all angles, we have moved beyond staff development and just finished our first year implementing daily social-emotional lessons for all students in the transformation zone. These lessons support our students in developing their own understanding of the science behind emotions. At the same time, it also provides them words and tools to express what they're feeling, why they are feeling it, and the ability to identify self-regulation techniques that work specifically for them. This is how self-regulation develops, not with a single lesson, but with individualized, ongoing practice throughout the day and over time. EVSC commits to continuing to research and expand this work. As the more we learn about neuroscience and how it can support educating the whole child, we recognize firsthand the existing barriers to student academic performance that lie beyond content alone. Our Turnaround Academy NWA focus is to help every student meet and ideally exceed their projected growth each year to close the skill gap that exists for many of our students. While we did not meet our identified year 2 goals in a reading or math, as you will see on the next slide, we did have 2 of the 3 schools show improvement in this area. The results in math echo those in reading. We see some improvement, but is not yet at the level we expected to see at this point in time. While we acknowledge NWEA is not directly aligned to Indiana's accountability tests, the expectations the TZ has set for our schools is regardless of mobility, non-tested grade levels, and alignment, that we continue to improve usage as it provides valuable information to make instructional decisions for our students and flags areas of strength and in need of growth. To improve practices going forward, professional learning communities will be able to leverage the Focus on Content one-pagers. And there's supplemental slides, so if you wanted to know more about that, that could be found on slide 15 in your packets. Created by a team of Transformation Zone teacher leaders to focus PLC processes and clearly define how to utilize NWEA to scaffold instruction and bridge gaps for students to standard mastery. Year 2 goals for our final benchmark metric of students obtaining standard or high movement on the state accountability assessment were set as the difference between the 16-17 baseline and our Year 5 goals. The 15-16 baseline, when applicable, provides us a wider lens for what the reality of school improvement can experience year to year with shifting staff and students. While our Year 2 results are not yet in, and will have the caveat of transitioning from iStep to iLearn assessment, we anticipate continued improvement, even if not in a perfect trajectory, toward our 5-year goals, as we have already seen forward motion in our ELA Year 1 results at 2 of the 3 schools. In math, we have shown improvement from the original 15-16 baseline at all 3 schools. It is important to note that the following was not set as a benchmark, but rather as further evidence that even within accountability test standards, EVSE Transformation Zone schools are seeing consistent improvement, as all 5 out of 5 schools, which includes the 3 turnaround academies, saw an increase in their accountability summary growth score from 2017 to 2018. While not perfect, we hope you see the impact EVSC's continued advancements in school improvement within our identified metrics and beyond. You've already seen the impact of neuroscience and social and emotional learning, training, and curriculum within schools who believe in and champion the strategies within the suspension metrics. These improvements are also echoed when looking at average office referral rates and social emotional survey metrics within Panorama for both staff and students. Beyond student climate, teacher climate has improved within the Transformation Zone certified staff retention rate, and you can see that on supplemental slide 12, climbing from 67% when the TZ was first launched to 83% at the end of the 2018-19 school year, and currently is sitting at 91% for this hiring season. This can be attributed to Transformation Zone operational flexibilities provided beyond school culture, such as the allowance of early contracts of high-quality candidates before vacancies exist, flexible staffing processes to allow for natural attrition when excess could occur, partnerships for year-long student teaching placements with local universities such as USI, and Transformation Zone certified full-time substitute teacher positions to allow for more on-the-job training before taking on the role of the lead teacher. All of these efforts combined have both decreased certified staff turnover and increased the skills of those who are hired. Our work with Learning Sciences International has continued at Glenwood and Case, that you can see on supplemental slides 13 and 14 for this year's rigor diagnostic results across benchmarks, marking improvement within each of the 5 instructional pillars. Glenwood Leadership Academy continues to be held in high regard nationally for their implementation and successful merging of social emotional learning with Tier 1 instruction, resulting in increased student collaboration and rigorous tasks aligned to the intent of Indiana academic standards. And some of you who have visited have actually seen some of that work in practice at Glenwood. EVSE is also undergoing a mobility study to grasp a better understanding of our mobility rates across multiple periods of time, who is moving and why, to learn what is within our control to provide stability for our students when they need it the most. With a clear picture of transients across our community, it brings to light the importance of not relying solely upon siloed school improvement, but larger district improvement as well for sustainability to exist. EVSE has already had many lessons learned in school improvement and continues to find new ways to push our thinking to do more and be better for all, especially our priority schools and students. The following are not new strategies, but instead refinements to drill down and deepen our efficacy in areas that are highest leveraged in a systemic way, such as early literacy and school support infrastructure. Within supplemental slides 16 through 19, you'll see select images from an EAB District Leadership Forum presentation, narrowing the third grade reading gap, embracing the science of reading to improve student outcomes. Slides selected show that special populations and minority students are more likely to be at risk for poor reading scores, but that almost all students have the capacity to read. More specifically, 95% of elementary students, regardless of background, are cognitively capable of learning to read when they receive sufficient direct instruction on the foundational skills of reading. EVSC's iRead is not yet at a 95% pass rate, and it's disproportionately lower within our priority schools, which is why EVSC is contracting with Letters to develop all K-2 reading teachers across the district starting this summer in kindergarten. The training will improve teacher knowledge in the science of reading and will be paired with EL Foundational Skills Reading curriculum, realigned to our Indiana academic standards, so teachers will have both the understanding of what needs to be done different as well as the tools to do so. With planning grant funds for CSI schools, EVSC contracted with Mass Insight to conduct a study on our current school support structure and ways to build a more robust and comprehensive model that would sustain school improvement as in our 5-year plan. This work is not yet complete, but so far is helping us to create a clear definition with criteria beyond just accountability grade of what makes a school high needs to continue to be proactive in our provided supports, differentiated school support caseloads, and stated district commitments and flexibilities with many lessons learned from what has worked or has not in the transformation zone and other districts nationally. This study has also highlighted the district's commitment to matching proven principal strengths with priority school needs, resulting in a few changes in leadership across EVSC and within our turnaround academies. In the 1920 school year, Glenwood Leadership Academy's current assistant principal, Angie Oliver, will be stepping up from a strong internal pipeline to continue the school improvement efforts merging social-emotional learning and a rigorous student-centered classroom at GLA. And Kay's Elementary will be led by Joe Schlosser, who has already led an EVSC school out of the lowest performing accountability category. I want to thank you for your time today. I hope I leave you with confidence that EVSC will continue to embrace continuous improvement and take proactive measures to improve our schools, staff, and supports in a sustainable manner for the students we serve. Do you all have any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I can carry on, or I can have a moment for BJ to re-enter the room. Perfect.
Next, we have CSUSA's presentation.
Greetings. Thank you again for the opportunity to be able to present in consideration that we've had extensive conversation on the data up to certain points. We've followed State Board staff's recommendation of a brief presentation and would be open to questions with that as well. I have been and continue to be thrilled to work with Misty Derito. She is the principal of Emmerich Manual High School and is joining our state team in regards to support for all of our schools, and we're extremely honored that she has accepted that role of being our state team director, and we'll continue to support her. I'll continue to support her with her work of leading our principals and the work that we continue to do with that, and we're honored to have her present and walk through the data that we have for these 3 academies, and we obviously sprinkle in the opportunity with the elementary school through the innovation agreement with IPS as well. So, Misty.
Thank you as well. So as Eric mentioned, I'll be speaking on behalf of the 3 schools and their leadership teams. but also integrating a little bit about the elementary because they are using the same strategies across our network as well. So their data also impacts the data of the middle school. So it's important to have an understanding of where the foundation for that has been in the growth of the middle school. So I'll be speaking in general a little bit about the schools as their goals, but then I'll break down the data for the independent schools as we go through. So we're going to talk into larger buckets of where our academics stand, and then how our culture has developed over the time. Our baseline data is 17-18, but you'll see I'll also reference some 16-17 data because we have made some really great strides since that time as well, and it's important in our foundation building. So our academic goals are driven by the ISTEP data, mostly proficiency. So our goal is always to improve by 5 to 10% of the prior academic year. So some of our highlights for that has been highly in our performance of ELA. But if you'll notice in math, Hal has made great strides. And that's why I think it's important to mention some 16-17 data as well in that. So I'll give some specific goal setting that we have done, but then talk about later the data that goes with that. Our middle school goals are the same, increasing the 5 to 10%, but we want to see that in anything that we're doing with the elementary as well, connected to iRead data. So as we look next, we have culture goals, and that I have encompassed from our middle schools and our high schools together, wanting to improve those. Again, not a set percentage per each school because it's very individual, but overall reducing our overall suspensions by 10%. So first we're going to look at Emmett Donnan in their middle school. And you'll see that I put some trending information for them. First I want to highlight some of their culture pieces. And you'll see this amongst the 3 schools, that you'll see fluctuation. But most consistency has happened at Emmett Donnan with their current trend being to way exceed their goal for this academic year, knowing that in 15-16 they were close to 500, and now they're to the low 200s as they're building the culture within that school. Their attendance has always been pretty steady. Their goal is 90, and when we were originally doing this documentation without the last month, we were at 88%. And we know that, with our transiency, that's still a great achievement, but we're always striving for the 90%, but know that they've put a lot of effort into making that particular piece happen. Again, they were very close in their academic goals last year to meet this current year's goals. So they're trending to surpass those, knowing that they were already just a little over 1% away from meeting their ELA goal, as well as their math goal. So they are on spot for that. We have a lot of benchmarks that we use for our predictions, and we're confident in the data that hopefully will be arriving to us soon. TC Howe, and if you'll just take a moment, where it says trending, it should say 88 instead of 68 for them. So I'll transition back to that in a moment. Their culture data, again, has seen a huge transformation. And if any of you have been able to walk through that building, you know the transformation that's happened in their culture. They've seen fluctuations. As we look, we were from 197, but we're always adapting our practices to ensure we're holding students accountable and that we have a safe environment for our students. So you'll see that fluctuation a little bit, but with our goal being at 244 this year. Their attendance, they are trending higher than their goal. They have worked really hard on putting their staff members into the community this year and making sure students are at school and they're communicating with the families, as well as putting ownership on the high school students to be present each day at school. With their proficiency, again, they're trending to surpass their goals. What I would love to highlight for them is the growth in ELA, but additionally, the amount of students who are passing both assessments. So those numbers have been low for us, and we are seeing more and more students being able to pass both assessments when you see that our intervention is extremely targeted in one direction. So we know that our strategies and the rigor we're implementing each day are working with our students. For Manual High School, our culture, we are again trending to meet our culture goal for this year, reduction by 10%. Our wavering has been the implementation of restorative justice as well. And so in that practice, we've had to change our approach, but we are trending to meet our goal of 329 this year. We should come in just below that. Attendance is a huge thing for me personally as the leader of that building. I take it upon myself to go out into the neighborhoods and see the kids because it is hard and they have a lot of outside responsibilities. So while our goal is 85, I would love to us to get into the 90s there as well and find ways through pathways that are engaging students in the needs that they have to fill for their family while they're missing school. And then with our academics, one of our huge highlights is also the ability to have students pass both assessments, going from 8% in the past to over 20 now. And we also have trending data that should prove that we're going to meet the goals that we've set for this upcoming year. So that's our historical data as it relates. So if you'll kind of look at where we are now, our bar graph is past data. The stars is our fall assessment data. So early on, what we knew about the students who were going to test before we started our interventions for this coming school year. So we've implemented very targeted instruction along with just universal turnaround strategies to increase that, with our highlight being growth. And I'm going to talk to you a little more about growth in a minute. But these instructional focuses, the stars are where they were before it. And our projections based on monthly data is putting us above where our bars are for the past years. So this is tiny if you want to look at your slides. But what is most important about this is that you'll see that students in the top 75% as well as the bottom 25% are equally growing. So our targeted intervention is helping students who are excelling already and who came to us strong or have come through our feeder school strong, as well as the students who come to us with deficiencies. So the strategies that we're implementing through instructional focus is also enriching students who have already seen a lot of success in high school, while we often see where we focus heavily on students who have deficiencies. So this is data that we are extremely proud of because it's showing our students are making the progress, even though our proficiency rates are not where we want them to be. So as we move forward, we want to, of course, keep meeting the goals we have set, but we're going to do this through the continuous improvement model. It's what we've been putting in place and where we've seen our most improvement from. Our staff continually trains on that, as well as our leadership teams, and we'll continue to implement that with each school. We'll continue to develop leadership within the team. So NEI has provided us a strong professional development structure for teacher leaders, building leaders, state team leaders. That is having everyone acknowledge what our goals are and set steps that are appropriate for them to meet our goals. We'll continue to engage in our community, in the state, and any nationwide resources that we can come to that are going to benefit our students and implement those with fidelity. And then we want to sustain our culture, and that is where we've seen the variance, and I feel like all three schools have found the place where they need to be, where again, anyone can come into our schools and walk our building and see the major differences. We've found that key piece and would invite anyone to come see what we've done. And then one of our newer initiatives that we're going to be pushing is SEL and getting that into the daily culture, the daily lessons, from teachers to support staff to leadership. Everyone is integrating that into the day because we know it's important to understand where our students are coming from, why they make decisions, how they feel when they come, because it impacts the learning environment for us.
And just a few of the highlights, we're encouraged by the data with the continuous implementation of the NEI continuous improvement model, the adaptation of the 8 steps the continuous improvement that's been used widely in Indiana turnaround and updates to schools as well. So we're extremely encouraged by the continuation of the data and the improvement that's doing that as well. With Emmett Elementary, with the only released data that we had accessible so far of looking at exceeding our highest initial pass rate of IREAD 3 for that as well. So that was encouraging, and we're excited about more students that are engaged in summer school for the opportunity to continue to advance there as well. In relation to the processes that we're working towards as we're going to charter as well, to the previous question before Ron and I danced at the podium, we are looking at how we're moving into that last year of intervention and our wildly important goal of how we're going about our goal setting with 4 disciplines of execution. Our training this summer would be strategic partnerships, and our primary strategic partner would be our parents. So as we're moving into charter of continuing to engage our parent community as we take those steps to that. We have been privileged and honored to be able to engage 7 community members to make up Rethink Forward Indiana as our governing board. They have been meeting and planning. We had submitted an initial charter to the Indiana Charter School Board. It was a very fast process. They made a special exception for us to be able to receive our charters in that process. The board decided to withdraw those charters and be more thoughtful in the next steps of the process, and then to engage in this next cycle. It was a very fast process, and they appreciated the opportunity to re-engage in the thoughtful process of compiling our charters, working together as a board, and they will be making a decision in regards to the authorizer that they will choose, and working through the process with that particular authorizer that they choose on their application process with letter of intent and engagement of that charter. So we are in anticipation of doing that. Misty is extremely excited to be able to work with the board and write the entire charter all by herself in the process of doing that. But again, our board members are extremely engaged. Our leadership is extremely engaged, and we're excited about the next steps in that process. Again, thank you with the discussion that we've had throughout the spring to be able to come back and to present once again.
As someone who's been able to spend some time in your buildings, I do want to say job well done. I mean, the best metric to me as far as how the school's doing is how the parents react to what you're doing for their kiddos. And I've seen firsthand the support that they give you. And if that wasn't there and things weren't going well, you would be hearing about it. So the fact that things are going well, you should hear that also. So keep up the good work.
Again, we're extremely grateful to the school leadership, Misty's leadership at Manual, our school leaders at each school, our teachers, our heroes. They dig in. We have asked a lot of our teachers and staff for implementation of these interventions in doing that, and their fidelity to the implementation of the NEI continuous improvement model, and working through as a community is a big lift. Jackie Sissel has been a stalwart for us in our community engagement, and our community partners have blossomed, have continued to provide support with that as well. And of course, without the support of NEI and this model that we're presenting with that, we would not be getting the results that we're getting. So we're extremely grateful for that, and look forward to continuing the interventions.
Thank you very much. Brian, we have Condesi up now. Correct. Good morning. I think I can still say that. Yes. 12 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Nicolette Whittington, and I am the assistant principal at Condesi. And I want to thank the State Board for the opportunity to present on the turnaround work being done at Condesi Academy. We are currently implementing an innovation restart to dramatically improve student outcomes at the school. Today's presentation is meant to provide an update on the effectiveness of the intervention at our school, demonstrate our progress toward the second and fifth year benchmarks through the use of aligned leading indicators of success, and highlight some of the innovative practices being implemented as a result of the innovation restart. So the following 5 goals represent our school growth benchmarks as outlined in our school performance framework. Increase total students growth points for the bottom 25% in math. Increase the total student growth points for the bottom 25% in ELA. Increase the percentage of students enrolled for 2+ years who are proficient on the state math assessment. Increase the percentage of students enrolled for 2+ years who are proficient on the state ELA assessment. Decrease the number of low growth students on math assessment. And right now we currently don't have a baseline data for benchmarks 3 and 4, but we'll have those at the end of the school year. So the annual leading indicators are our NWEA math testing data, intern assessment data through Illuminate, and our independent reading level assessments in grades K through 3rd. So our current progress to the benchmark 1 is slightly below our target. We believe this slight dip in performance was the result of a transition to a more rigorous math curriculum. Our teachers have been provided additional training support in the implementation, and we are seeing promising results from the weekly and intern assessments due to that training this school year. So in year 1, we exceeded our year 2 goal for benchmark 2, increasing the student growth points for the bottom 25% of ELA. We believe this increase in student growth points was the result of a targeted literacy intervention curriculum, which is American Reading Company, being implemented across the school. Teachers receive bi-weekly professional developments in the American Reading Company to ensure fidelity in implementation. So we have performance data for benchmarks 3 and 4 this summer, since we will have students who have been enrolled at least 2 years to track. In year 1, we decreased the number of low growth students to 54% from 56%. We anticipate a continuous decrease, and we are on track to our year 2 benchmark. So we utilize the Illuminate assessment platform to measure our students' growth and proficiency rates on the state assessment aligned benchmarks. Both our 3rd and 6th grade levels met or exceeded proficiency targets based on the previous year's data. 4th and 5th grade were nearing targets at their last administration. 48% of the students who were persistent for 60% of the year achieved end of the year growth targets. This nears our target 65%, but demonstrates an opportunity for progress next year. Our turnaround efforts have focused on the following efforts: professional development, adoption of rigorous curriculum, effective intervention supports, and also positive behavior supports. Candazi have engaged in a number of professional development opportunities to strengthen the knowledge of our skills and leadership in the instructional teams. With that being said, we've had Attune Partners Leadership Development of Coaching, Instruction Partners Instructional Leadership Team Development, Standards Institute, Relay National Principals Fellowship, and also the Leader in Me. We have also engaged in shared instructional rounds and with instructional leadership teams, teachers, and consultants to develop shared rubrics for high-quality teaching. We have selected top-rated rigorous curriculum that align to our students' instructional needs. Teachers have engaged in professional development on standard-aligned assessments, differentiation strategies, and data-driven instructional practices. A list of our adapted curriculum can be found below, which is Wit of Wisdom, ELA. We use Eureka Math for math, a reading company, which is the American Reading Company for the ELA intervention, and the Zanner-Bolzer strategies for writing and writing instruction. We have increased the intervention efforts by increasing our intervention staff from 3 staff members to 6. So each grade band has 1 intervention teacher in their grade band. We're partnered with Indiana Council for Education, Students of Color, So those students receive 2 hours of extensive after-school tutoring, and we implemented blending learning interventions through Lexia, reading, Mind Play Reading, Ascend Math, and also Zern Math. These programs and staff members support Tier 2 and 3 interventions. To improve student engagement with learning and maximize instructional efforts, we have engaged in robust development and positive behavior supports. This school-wide practices have decreased our school suspension rate and increased instructional minutes in each classroom. Some of the efforts adopted are HERO K-12, PBS site, responsive classroom training, and also Teach Like a Champion trainings. I thank you again for this opportunity to share with an update of what's going on in Kandezi. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Yes.
I really appreciate the fact that you had that you're looking at persistence data.
Okay.
Just a couple of questions. You use 60% of the year. Where did you come up with that from? Did you get that from somewhere, or how did you determine you were going to look at 60% of the year?
So we start off with each marking period with the intern assessments. So looking at those data, so we start off actually from the beginning of looking at those intern assessments that we do with Illuminate and pull that data from that. From the
No, but where did you decide we're going to look at if the student's there 60% of the year? I'm not refuting that. I was just curious as to how you came up with that number, not 80% or 75. Was there any? Right, this right here, where you say persisted for 60% of the year. How did you come up with 60%?
It came from those intern assessments that the students were given. I'm not sure if that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. Appreciate
Thank you.
the use of data to track growth. I have a question about using NWEA to track the growth, and that's essentially what you're using right from year to year to see if students are improving. And my question is, I'm going to ask you to speculate if students increase performance on NWEA, does that mean they're going to increase performance on iLearn?
So we use that actual Illuminate intern assessment to see where those students will actually perform on the iLearn. So looking at the NWEA, that's just the growth of the students, so where they are and where they started. So we usually use that Illuminate assessment that I previously talked about that actually sees where the students would align and actually meeting those, passing the iLearn. And so we kind of use hand in hand, but more so the Illuminate assessments interns that take place.
I would just caution you to be sure that whatever you're using as the go-between, in this case Illuminate, that there is an alignment between Illuminate, NWEA, and iLearn. I think we're going to see some surprises from districts who use NWEA, and there's a number of them using it, and that's terrific. I believe in NWEA. But as I read the research, there's not a direct alignment between NWEA and iLearn. I'm unfamiliar with Illuminate, so Illuminate may do that. But I appreciate what you're doing, but just be cognizant of that, and you might want to investigate that a little more.
Can I speak to that a little? Yeah. Because I was going to wait till after your presentation because it really isn't about your presentation. So when you think about what's happening with iLearn and a redesigned test, there are products that are coming out that are more aligned to the data that would attach to iLearn. And so specifically, there's a product called AIR. And again, I don't work for a testing company. I'm not promoting a testing company in any way, shape, or form. But there are products out there that I believe will change the face of how we look at schools and improvement, and really in all schools, because there are adaptive tests that are specific to grade level bands, whereas NWEA can go across many grade level bands. So that data will come that I believe is more aligned and would be more strategic to use, especially in these types of plans.
Thank you.
So you might want to shift, don't shift away from NWEA, because that's a a diagnostic
Right.
kind of testing that provides great information to teachers that they can then tailor instruction. But just realize the quantum leap from NWEA to iLearn, it is a quantum leap. You're going to need an interim kind of thing to what my colleague just talked about.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Up next, we have Governor's Workforce Cabinet update. PJ, welcome, sir.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I have a few things I'll give Leanne that she can give you guys after the meeting or after my presentation here. Good morning. I am PJ McGrew, the Executive Director of the Governor's Workforce Cabinet. I worked with most of you previously when I was Chief of Staff of the Board and also in the Governor's Office as the Education Policy Director. So I'm not sure if we ever walked through with you guys just an overview of the cabinet when it was created 2018 when I left that education policy advisor role to move over to the cabinet. So, we were created in 2018 via Senate Bill 50. One of the things that you guys may have been aware of at the time was that the State Workforce Board, or the SWIC, was underneath the Department of Workforce Development. It had a lot of the same people at the table that we have now, but it was buried underneath DWD. And so in 2018, we really wanted to make a concerted effort to raise the level of not only workforce development, but collaboration across the state agencies that were on that cabinet, and moved it underneath the governor's office. So that's why, structure matters, getting those leaders together within state government, higher education, nonprofit, and then industry leaders to really look at what we were charged with, which was to examine our education system at large, really pre-K all the way through career, to make sure that there was alignment there, not only for today, but also for tomorrow. And I think that's the important thing in all of this that gets lost sometimes, is when we're trying to think through and advise the cabinet on making decisions, we need to be conscious about just the economic changes, in that this is a dynamic economy, and we can't think about getting people's skills for today, but what are those transferable skills that will apply for tomorrow. So we were charged with 4 main priorities in our first year. Those were developing recommendations on career coaching and navigation, looking at the state CTE system, looking at all of our state-funded workforce programs, and then also looking at all of our state-funded college programs. So as a result of, months of work on those 4 areas, we developed recommendations that were approved unanimously by the cabinet in October. And then the governor used those recommendations to craft some of his legislative priorities that were outlined in House Bill 1002. So, there has been a lot of questions and concerns around one of those areas in particular, which was the professional growth point recommendation, which you guys may have seen in the news recently. And so I just wanted to talk briefly about the changes to the PGP requirements that were outlined in 1002, and then answer any other questions that you guys may have. So, currently teachers have 3 options to renew their licenses: 6 hours of college coursework, earning a national board certification, or earning 90 professional growth points via professional development, some form or another. The change that we recommended to the PGPs were requiring 15 of those 90 points to focus on career awareness. What does that mean? Well, it definitely does not mean that an externship or volunteering is required now. No additional hours are required, right? It's 15 of those 90, so we're just refocusing a portion of those 90 hours on career awareness activity, many of which, many schools are already doing some of these things, and that was what we learned through that career coaching team that we put together that met over 10 times last summer and fall, that schools are already doing these things. So how do we continue to highlight the good work that schools are already doing? And again, it's local control. So the building level administrators will still verify what counts to earn those points. And so, they're going to use their professional judgment on what is a career awareness activity that will satisfy those point requirements. So, the benefits, expanding career exposure and engagement in the classroom before high school. I do want to point out, there's been some questions about the elementary teachers in this regard. Well, starting in 6th grade, students are required to put together their graduation plan. One of the things on that graduation plan is making it and tying it to a broader career plan. Yes, your career aspirations change. I wanted to be a brain surgeon in 7th grade. Obviously, I'm not doing that. But getting them to think about those things prior to high school. And so it is important for elementary teachers to kind of understand just what exists out there, where can I find the latest, most relevant information on careers, and start to inform their students even at the elementary level on that. In addition, you guys just approved last month employability skill standards. Those go all the way down to K2. And so locals will be developing, I'm sure, professional development on how to embed those employability skill standards into classrooms. So there's that. It helps connect years of classroom learning to the real world application. One of the things when we brought students in to speak to them about career awareness, they thought that was really lacking in some of our instructional practices, but they just couldn't see the relevance in what they were learning and its connection to the real world. Enhances current professional development opportunities to further learning, support students' long-term goals. Students need to be thinking long-term. You guys took a bold step a few years ago when you did the graduation pathways and recognized that a high school diploma isn't enough any longer. So how are we starting earlier to inform students that you need to continue that notion of lifelong learning toward their long-term goals? And it also complements the focus of the DOE STEM plan, which was on project-based and inquiry-based learning. So as we incorporate some of those strategies in the classroom, there will be an additional opportunity for students to earn PGPs and satisfy this requirement that way. So some examples. Creating professional learning communities to integrate employability skill standards into cross-curricular integration in elementary classrooms. We heard from teachers in LaPorte, Michigan City, that they were meeting with their local leaders to understand the economic trends in their community. One of our cabinet members works for Fort Wayne Metals. He convened 20 employers in the Fort Wayne area to develop an externship program which paid teachers to go into those facilities to learn how they could connect what they were teaching with what they were seeing in those facilities. Educator boot camps. These are being offered by many different regional collaboratives, such as the Regional Opportunities Initiative in Bloomington, Grow Southwest, the State Workforce Board down in Evansville. Lilly Endowment has brought in last year over 200 educators for a 2-week-long experience. So we're seeing, groups coming together and offering externship opportunities for teachers, and not just volunteering, but also paying them for their experiences and taking what they're teaching in the classroom and connecting it to something outside the classroom. The department has their work-based learning teachers and counselors and industry summer internship, and this also gives teachers an opportunity to learn valuable skills outside the classroom and take it back to their classrooms. Another opportunity that we think will also provide opportunity for teachers to earn professional development points here is the career coaching grants that we advocated for in 1002. We were given a line item in 1001 to put forth 2 different types of career coaching grants, a planning grant or an implementation grant, really not around staffing career coaching, but how are we utilizing resources that already exist at the local level, whether that's post-secondary and connecting high schools with their local community college or other post-secondary institution, the workforce boards, leveraging all of those experiences outside to come together to build a true system around career coaching. And I'm sure that as we're learning labor market information and other things in that regard, that PGPs can be earned there as well. And we hope to get those career coaching grant applications out by either this Friday or Monday. So I'll be sure to share that information. I will send it to all superintendents, principals, and a number of other organizations as well. The career coaching grants, we're really going to measure the effectiveness of the outcomes. So seeing an increase in post-secondary enrollment and attainment, an increase in the number of high-wage, high-demand jobs filled, and an increase in the average annual wages in the community. So the implementation grants will last for a period of up to at least 3 years, maybe beyond that. So we can start to see, are the initiatives that locals are creating as a part of this really moving the needle within their communities. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
It's really just a comment. First of all, thank you so much for being here. Obviously, when there's a change so close to teachers' hearts and, in terms of licensing, it does kind of create a little stir, a little buzz. And so having this information come out in a timely way and to provide examples of how it can look different and it's so attainable is really helpful. So thank you.
And Marion, I know that you guys are already doing a lot of this in Avon. I've come out to your schools a number of times and talked with teachers and all of that, just about, things that are happening at the state level, things that are happening in the economy. So I know that you guys are doing great work out there.
PJ, thanks for being here. Good to see you back in the state board room. As teachers have questions and other school people have questions, who do they go to? This is really a workforce development issue. Do you have an office that's taking calls?
The lead on this? I have fielded, so I think Brian or Leanne passed out the memo that I had shared with superintendents and principals 2 weeks ago now. I have started fielding some questions on that myself. But I do think I want to continue to we're working with the Department of Workforce Development right now to build out a series of webinars for teachers where they can locate labor market information, who within their local community is best to connect with, and some of those other things. So it might be, and the department has some of their own opportunities going on as well. So I think it's kind of going to have to be us all working at the state level on a collaborative approach on that. But also the Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship will be one area to connect with. And I do know that Ben Carter with the department is working on a work-based learning guide that he's hoping to bring to the cabinet relatively soon. And so as we start to work on those things at a state level, we'll be getting out information to educators on who to connect with.
Thanks for sharing that. I commend on the board whoever said get it out early and talk about it. And then we're sort of in the next phase of sharing information. People have individual kinds of questions, and sometimes the webinars and things deal with that, but sometimes a person has an individual question. So at the right time, it's too early yet. I think we need to have a coordinated office or a person to call. I didn't see your personal cell phone number on your memo, and I wouldn't advise that, but I suggest at some point, because I'm getting questions and I'm just referring them at this point. People are excited about this, and they want to know more. And so I think let's keep the momentum moving.
Yeah, and I also know that the Principals Association is working on something around this area right now as well.
Great.
So I'm sure that they'll have more information to share in the short term on that. And so, we're all trying to work together on this.
But I appreciate your coming and also expressing that there's a great deal of flexibility and local control, and that administrators still have discretion over a lot of this. And so that flexibility gives people some breathing room.
Yeah, I think it was important to clarify. I mean, I did see, out there that, we were requiring an externship or teachers to volunteer, and that's just absolutely not the intent of what we did, nor is it what is outlined in legislation. So.
Thank you, sir.
I do.
Oh, sorry, Joe.
I just do have, but if you're going to use your PGB points, you have to do the 15 hours, correct?
Yes, the 15 of those 90 need to be in some career awareness activities,
Okay. And just as a practicing teacher, I mean, this is not going over well.
I am aware.
Well over 20,000 teachers, myself and my wife included, who've already started our application before the July 1 deadline, because I know 15 hours doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a single mom, single dad, getting the daycare, doing these externships, we're having such a struggle just keeping teachers teaching. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm just telling you, with the boots on the ground, with the people I work with, they were very upset about this. We're just trying to teach our curriculum and worry about the mental health of our students and the school safety and all the other things that we have to worry about. And then just to throw this at the end of the school year was really not the way we wanted to end our school year going into the summer with yet another requirement from the state.
Right.
And I know some are paying, but some aren't. I've read about Westfield, I can go learn how to work at a brewery, but I don't know how that really impacts
And
my
that obviously wasn't the intent either.
Right.
So, I mean, I do think that's why I thought it was important to kind of highlight, you know, the employability skill standards that we've been working on. I think BJ was on that team, maybe Dr. Freitas as well with the department, really building those out over the last year and a half before they came to the board for approval last month as an opportunity for either the state to take the lead on developing professional development on how to integrate those in the classroom, or locals to develop their own professional development on integrating those in the classroom. And then, and you know, the economy is always changing, and you know, we have an opportunity with graduation pathways and some other things to develop, you know, pretty robust PD opportunities around some of these things to inform students on just where they need to be going if they want to access these opportunities on down the road.
PJ, this is somewhat unrelated, but which state body is taking the lead looking into disruptions that are going to be caused by artificial intelligence? I mean, we're talking about in the not too recent future.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were just listed by Brookings in January as the #1 state for disruption to our economy based on automation.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what study you're looking at. I mean, Oxford study says as many as 47% of current U.S. jobs in the not distant future will be highly at risk.
So those
You've
are
had some
things.
studies saying up to 60% of the jobs may just be eliminated. I mean, I'm concerned. I mean, as we have graduation pathways and the good thing we've put in place there has to be a look back from a high level in terms of what are we really preparing kids to do.
Correct.
And I feel some of that responsibility obviously rests here at SBOE, and I think we have to start looking at that seriously. But how, in terms of the way the structure now with the governor's workforce development, who do you see as being on point for that discussion?
So we do have an industry subcommittee underneath the cabinet that we are going to start focusing on some of those future of work, you know, plans, activity, figuring out where the disruptions are. I just had a meeting this morning. You know, we are the second skillful state. Skillful is a Markle initiative, really through Microsoft philanthropy and partner with LinkedIn. But they've developed a job descriptor tool that looks at skills, not necessarily using degrees as a barrier for some of these occupations. But in our conversation this morning, we were talking about, you know, how do we look at those durable, transferable skills that are going to be impactful on down the road as the disruptions happen? And is there a way that we can look at, you know, our top occupations now, those skills that transfer across all of those occupations and will apply on into the future, and how do we start, you know, creating some T-shaped learning, you know, so you have your broad, transferable, durable skills at the top and then some more technical skills on down the road. But we also have to, you know, continue to reiterate the fact that, you know, your learning doesn't stop at the time that you get a high school diploma or a college degree anymore, because the economy is rapidly changing. We're going to have to create lifelong learning. And so, you know, those are some of the things that we are talking about and thinking about at the cabinet level with Commissioner Lubbers at the Commission for Higher Education being the interim chair of our cabinet right now since Danny stepped down. We are really thinking about how are we, you know, thinking about higher education a little bit differently than before and creating some of those opportunities. So, you know, if you would like to be a part of one of those subcommittees, happy to have you join.
I would definitely love to be a part of that. But I mean, not just higher education, but K to 12.
Yeah.
Because we're really talking about an economic reality that's probably going to affect schools, I mean, kids that are in middle school now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I read the stat that, so 50% of jobs that will exist for students that are in kindergarten now just aren't even there yet. So
because not only just the elimination of jobs, it's really changing how we think of work in general. Just in terms of hours. I mean, obviously you're not going to work for the same company anymore for 30 or 40 years. But, you know, there's a cultural discussion that has to go around how we define work, as well as making sure that academic standards and the preparation down the K-12 line is in sync with the new economy.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that we did last fall in partnership with CICP through some funding with the Fairbanks Foundation was really start to try to get at the mindset of students, parents, educators, and employers just on how education connects to not a job, but a career. And we really found some fascinating data and statistics on that survey and that we did. And so I think kind of knowing those attitudes that exist, you're right, it really is a culture change. And I think that we're putting in place some things to help address that.
Great, so just so I'm clear, you're taking the lead on that, your
Yeah.
department?
Yeah.
All right.
So, but happy to have you at the table, Tony.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Enjoy your afternoon.
Employability skills update. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Hello. Ben Carter and I are here. I know that last month the board approved the employability skills standards. Those have been communicated to the field. There was not an expectation of a presentation, but we thought we'd just give you a high-level overview of what is happening. What we've found also is that the employability skills were related to SEA 297 from 2018. So as you know, BJ and Dr. Freitas, you were part of the group that helped put those skills together as part of that legislation. Recently, we also discovered in HEA 1002, we found that there's an expectation for schools to identify career awareness and career development expectations that they're putting in place in our schools. So as we have, moving forward, trying to find that balance between making sure that we're meeting the demands and the needs of the legislation, but also being respectful and responsible to our K-12 family, what we are going to be doing moving forward is producing a document that will be provided to the field. There'll be guidance that will be coming out here in the next couple of weeks. A summary document will be provided to the field where they will basically summarize what is happening currently in terms of employability skills and career awareness, career development in the schools. And then longer term, we think our schools need to have time to really process through these things through this year and build those into their school improvement plans moving forward. So those would be submitted as part of the school improvement planning process. So we think we're meeting the legislative expectations, but also being responsible and respectful of our K-12 family as well. So that's a high-level overview, but we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions of board members? Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
And we do not have a TAC update, so that brings us to, Gordon, you want to sign us off here?
Sure. I move to adjourn.
Second. Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Yeah, that's kind of cool. So, if you meet 2 minutes before, I'll get ready to leave you with.